Compassion is the basis of morality. This short quote by Schopenhauer unravels one of the most profound and challenging truths about the human condition. At its core, it suggests that true morality cannot be rooted in rigid rules, societal expectations, or fear of punishment, but only in the capacity to feel another's suffering as your own. Compassion is the raw emotion that rises when we witness pain we cannot ignore, when someone else's burden becomes heavy on our own soul, and we act not because we should, but because we must. Morality is often mistaken for external obedience to laws, to commandments, to social codes, but these are hollow without the pulse of empathy. Schopenhauer proposes that only when we truly feel the suffering of others do we become moral beings. It's not about being told what's right. It's about being moved by what's right. Compassion does not come from intellect. It comes from the heart's recoil at another's distress. That involuntary ache is morality in its purest form. When someone helps a stranger with no hope of recognition, when a child cries for an injured animal, when a person risks their own comfort to relieve someone else's pain, that is morality born from compassion. It is instinctive, deeply human, and deeply real. Without compassion, all laws are sterile, all ethics are performances, but with it, even small actions carry sacred weight. This quote quietly reveals that the soul of ethics isn't logic. It's love in motion, stirred by the silent pain of another. We can do what we want, not want what we want. In these words, Schopenhauer rips open the illusion of free will with brutal precision. Most people believe they are in control of their choices, their dreams, their lives. But this quote forces us to confront a deeper truth. While we may choose between options, we do not choose the desires that drive us. They arise from a place beyond logic, beyond decision, beyond self. You didn't choose to love who you love, fear what you fear, crave what you crave. The wanting simply arrives, uninvited, unreasoned, and overpowering. Think about that. You can direct your steps, but not your yearning. You can walk away from someone, but you cannot make your heart stop reaching. You can silence your mouth, but not your mind's hunger. This realization is terrifying. It shakes the foundation of what we believe about freedom, because if we don't control what we want, how free are we, really? And yet, it is also deeply humanizing. It reveals that behind every addiction, every obsession, every unfulfilled longing lies not weakness, but powerlessness, not failure, but fate. You cannot judge someone for what they want. You can only hope they survive it. This quote pulls you into the quiet war happening within all of us, the fight not to act on desire, but to understand that desire owns us before we ever touch it. And when we realize we didn't choose our wanting, we stop pretending others chose theirs. Talent hits a target. Genius hits the invisible. With this haunting sentence, Schopenhauer draws a line between skill and vision, between what is merely excellent and what is utterly transcendent. Talent is precision. It is practiced hands, sharp focus, and the ability to reach a goal that everyone sees. But genius fires arrows into the dark and somehow splits the center of something no one else even noticed was there. Talent earns applause. It wins competitions, masters forms, and repeats greatness. But genius rewrites the form itself. It creates new languages, new worlds, and new ways of seeing. It does not aim at what's expected. It pierces what no one imagined could be touched. And that's why it's so often misunderstood. The talented are celebrated in their time. The genius is often ridiculed, doubted, or ignored until the world finally catches up and gasps. There's something tragic in this distinction because genius walks alone. It speaks in tones that others cannot hear yet. It feels the weight of truths that haven't found words. It bears the ache of seeing a future others are blind to. That loneliness is the price of hitting invisible targets. This quote is not just admiration, it is a warning. Talent may be rewarded, but genius is endured. It is both gift and exile. And when someone sees what no one else can, their brilliance may look like madness, until the moment the rest of the world finally sees what was invisible all along. Loss teaches value. In these three quiet words, Schopenhauer distills a truth that most of us don't fully grasp until it's too late. We walk through life assuming permanence. We hold people, comforts, routines, even our own health, with a looseness that borders on blindness. We believe, often without knowing it, that what surrounds us will always be there, until one day it isn't. And in that aching absence, we finally feel what we never stop to see. There is something brutally honest about the way loss burns clarity into us. The friend you always assumed would return your call, the parent you thought you had more time with, the version of yourself that used to laugh freely, all gone in a moment, leaving behind a hollow space that echoes louder than any presence ever did. That echo is the sound of value being realized too late. Loss does not whisper, it roars. It shakes you out of your numbness and demands attention. It reminds you that everything you love is borrowed, that nothing is truly yours to keep. And yet, this is what gives life its unbearable beauty. Because once you've lost something irreplaceable, you begin to see everything else with new eyes. The mundane becomes sacred. The ordinary becomes precious. This quote doesn't just speak of grief. It speaks of awakening. It's a reminder that value isn't found in possession, but in the awareness of impermanence. And once you've learned that lesson through loss, you carry it into everything you love ever again. Writing for Fools guarantees an audience. Schopenhauer didn't mean this as a compliment. He meant it as a warning. In a world hungry for attention and instant gratification, there is an easy path to popularity. Speak to the lowest common denominator. Appeal not to depth, not to truth, not to the aching complexity of the human spirit, but to simplicity, noise, and comfort. If you write in a way that requires no thought, no discomfort, no growth, the crowd will cheer, because the crowd doesn't want to think. It wants to feel entertained, flattered, and safe in its ignorance. This quote strikes with cruel precision because we see it everywhere. Hollow books that sell millions, loud voices drowning out wise ones, shallow ideas dressed in gold, while quiet truths gather dust. The tragedy isn't that fools exist, it's that the world is rigged to reward them. It takes courage to write what's difficult, to express something that pierces, unsettles, or demands more. But it takes cunning to sell the lie people want to hear. And that is the dark temptation Schopenhauer exposes. If you want attention, don't aim high, aim wide. Say what confirms bias. Wrap mediocrity in confidence. Make fools feel wise, and they will follow you anywhere. But once you see this, you cannot unsee it. You begin to wonder who you're writing for. You begin to fear that the more people applaud, the less you've said. Because if your words never risk rejection, they probably never mattered. And if they're too easy to love, maybe they weren't honest at all. Everyone mistakes their view for the world's limits. It's one of the most haunting flaws of the human mind. We believe the edges of our understanding are the edges of reality itself. What we cannot see, we assume does not exist. What we cannot imagine, we dismiss as impossible. And in doing so, we shrink the vastness of the world into the smallness of our own perception. We live inside a frame built from our upbringing, beliefs, traumas, and assumptions. That frame becomes our compass, our truth, our identity. We trust it, we defend it, and without realizing it, we begin to judge every other life, thought, or feeling that exists outside of it. But the world is not confined by what you know. The truth is not limited to what you have lived. There are entire galaxies of experience that never intersect with yours, and yet they are just as real, just as deep, just as human. This is why empathy is so hard. To truly understand another person means admitting that your way of seeing isn't the only way, that your truths might be incomplete, that someone else's pain, joy, or belief might be born from a reality you've never touched, and that requires humility, the kind that shatters pride and stretches the soul. Schopenhauer's quote cuts like a blade because it reveals how much of our certainty is illusion. It reminds us that the borders we draw around truth are often just the limits of our imagination, and what we refuse to see can still shape us, break us, or save us. Happiness is nothing more than the repetition of pleasure. This quote is not sweet, it's surgical. Schopenhauer doesn't dress happiness in romantic light. He strips it bare, reducing it to its most mechanical truth. What we call happiness isn't a permanent state, a shining destination, or some grand emotional awakening. It is simply this: the feeling we get when something pleasurable repeats itself often enough that we forget, for a while, the emptiness underneath. You eat your favorite food, not once, but again and again. You chase laughter, affection, validation. Each moment of pleasure is short, but string enough of them together, and we begin to call it happiness. It's comforting to believe this lie, but the moment the repetition breaks or the pleasure loses intensity, we're left with the hollowness it was covering. The withdrawal begins, the ache returns, and we begin searching for the next fix, like addicts pretending they're chasing joy when they're really just trying to outrun discomfort. What makes this truth so unsettling is that it reframes happiness not as fulfillment, but as distraction, a temporary chain of sensations, not a destination of the soul. It means that even our highest highs are stitched together from fleeting moments we try to hold still, but can't. And yet, we keep going, because in those brief repetitions, in those surges of pleasure, be it a touch, a laugh, a song, we feel alive. Even if we know it won't last, even if we know it's just borrowed light, we return to it again and again and again. Health shouldn't be sacrificed. Schopenhauer didn't shout this truth. He offered it like a warning, one that most people ignore until it's too late. In the chase for success, approval, money, love, anything that makes us feel worthy, we treat our health like it's disposable, like it's something we can reclaim once the race is won. But the body doesn't wait. It remembers every skipped meal, every restless night, every moment we silenced its cries with caffeine, pills, or distraction. And one day, it starts to speak back, not with whispers, but with pain. We trade hours of sleep for deadlines. We swallow stress like it's air. We live in fight or flight mode and call it ambition. But behind that hustle is a slow erosion. The body breaks quietly until one day it doesn't. And when it doesn't, everything we were striving for, the job, the title, the recognition, becomes meaningless in the shadow of our own collapse. Schopenhauer knew that without health, all other forms of happiness are just illusions. You can't enjoy success if your mind is anxious and your body is weak. You can't love fully when you're running on empty. You can't be who you are if the vessel carrying you is breaking down. And yet, society rewards the burnouts. It glamorizes the grind. It sells us the idea that we're only as valuable as what we produce. But your body is not a machine. It's the foundation of everything you hope to do, feel, and become. Sacrifice it, and you lose everything. Humor is divine. In this short, almost playful claim, Schopenhauer reveals something profound and easily overlooked, that laughter is not just amusement, but a spiritual force. In a world steeped in suffering, struggle, and absurdity, humor is the crack of light that reminds us we are more than what we endure. It rises out of the same chaos that breaks us, yet it doesn't break. It lifts. It transforms pain into perspective, powerlessness into play. To laugh in the face of tragedy is not to deny it. It's to reclaim your soul from it. Unlike intellect, which separates, or logic, which classifies, humor unites. It crosses boundaries of culture, class, even time. A joke well-timed can break down walls faster than any argument. A shared laugh can heal wounds deeper than words. And perhaps most miraculously, humor survives where everything else fails. When the mind is exhausted, when faith has dried up, when love has collapsed into silence, humor still lives, quietly, boldly. That's why it is divine, because it doesn't come from reason, but from something deeper, something childlike, transcendent, and wildly human. It lets us see the ridiculousness of our own suffering and invites us to smile at what we cannot change. Even God, if he exists, must have laughed the day he made us. Schopenhauer saw that amid all the weight of life, philosophy, pain, longing, humor remains untouched, holy, a flash of joy that defies despair, not a distraction from truth, but perhaps its purest form, the divine absurdity of still laughing while the world burns. Envy is human, Schadenfreude is evil. This quote by Schopenhauer slices through the complex emotions we hide behind social masks and exposes a dark truth most are too ashamed to admit. Envy, while painful, is a wound we all carry. It stings when we see someone with the life we wanted, the love we lost, the success we couldn't reach. It doesn't mean we hate them. It means we're hurting in the shadow of what we wish we had. Envy whispers, "Why not me?" It's flawed, but it's human. It arises from longing. But Schadenfreude, that's something else entirely. That's the joy in someone else's suffering, that quiet satisfaction when someone stumbles, that subtle thrill when the person we resented fails. It is cold, calculated, and cruel. It doesn't just come from pain, it comes from wanting another to feel pain. And that's where evil begins. In the moment, we trade empathy for delight in destruction. Schopenhauer forces us to confront the part of ourselves we try to bury. We pretend we're above it, but those glimmers of pleasure in someone's fall, they reveal our darkest impulses, and they should terrify us, because they show how easily we can become what we hate. They show how quickly we can lose our humanity. Envy can be healed. It can turn into inspiration, into drive, into self-reflection. But Schadenfreude corrodes the soul. It turns suffering into entertainment. It poisons the heart. And if we do not stop it, it becomes a quiet celebration of cruelty in a world already aching from too much of it. Man inflicts pain needlessly. It's a quote that doesn't ask questions or offer excuses. It accuses. Schopenhauer doesn't soften the blow because the truth doesn't need decoration. Human beings, despite their intelligence, despite their ability to empathize, often become the architects of suffering, not out of survival, but out of choice, out of convenience, out of indifference, out of a casual cruelty so deeply woven into our systems that we no longer notice it. We kill for taste, not for hunger. We hurt with words because it feels powerful. We punish those who are different because their existence challenges our comfort. And worst of all, we watch others suffer and choose silence because standing up might cost us something, and we fear even the smallest inconvenience more than we fear becoming inhuman. This quote isn't about the grand evils of history. It's about the everyday harm, overlooked, excused, normalized, the animals caged for entertainment, the children broken by pressure, the stranger dismissed, mocked, erased. Every time we look away, we become part of it. Every time we justify the pain we cause because it's legal or common or profitable, we betray the very morality we pretend to uphold. What makes this truth unbearable is not just that we hurt others, it's that we could stop. We have the power to choose differently, and most of us never do. Not because we don't know better, but because we've decided not to care. Schopenhauer forces us to see that indifference is not neutral. It is a decision, and it has consequences. Bleeding, screaming consequences we pretend not to hear. Politeness melts resistance. Politeness melts resistance, not through force, but through disarmament. It is the softest form of power, the invisible hand that calms tempers, opens doors, and lowers shields without anyone realizing what's happening. Schopenhauer understood that humans are reflexively guarded. We walk through the world armored by suspicion, ego, and past hurt. And when someone approaches us with demand, aggression, or entitlement, those defenses snap into place. But when they come with genuine politeness, with tone softened, words chosen gently, respect given freely, something profound happens. The walls don't rise, they fall. There's a quiet magic in being treated kindly when you expect confrontation. In a moment of tension, a soft-spoken word can undo a hard heart. A sincere please, a humble tone, a small gesture of courtesy. It tells the other person, "You are safe here. I'm not your enemy." And safety creates space for connection. It turns arguments into conversations, strangers into allies, enemies into humans again. But this isn't weakness. True politeness is strength under control. It requires emotional discipline to stay calm when provoked, to respond with dignity when insulted. It's the grace to meet hostility with civility, not to surrender, but to lead the moment. And in that pause, that calm, the other person often softens too. Their resistance, their anger, fear, pride, melts without a fight. Politeness doesn't manipulate, it invites. It lowers the temperature of human conflict and makes room for something better to emerge, not because it demands obedience, but because it earns trust. And that is real influence. Buying books is easy, reading them isn't. In this deceptively simple observation, Schopenhauer holds a mirror up to one of our most romantic lies, the idea that ownership is equivalent to understanding. We buy books to feel intelligent, ambitious, even virtuous. A shelf full of unread pages becomes a silent monument to the person we wish we were. The act of purchasing feels like progress, a declaration of intent. I will grow, I will learn, I will know. But the truth is colder. Buying a book is a moment. Reading it is a commitment. Finishing it, truly absorbing it, is a kind of discipline that few are willing to endure. Because reading, real reading, demands more than time. It demands stillness in a noisy world. It demands focus in a mind trained for distraction. It asks you to slow down, to think, to engage with ideas that might unravel the beliefs you've built your identity around. A purchased book flatters your ego. A read book challenges it. This quote stings because we feel its truth every time we glance at that growing pile of untouched novels, half-finished texts, or philosophical works too dense for a tired brain at the end of the day. We wanted their wisdom, but not their weight. And yet, the weight is where the transformation lives. Schopenhauer isn't mocking us. He's warning us. Knowledge cannot be bought. Depth cannot be downloaded. And a library, no matter how beautiful, means nothing unless you enter its pages and let them change you. One sentence at a time. Change is eternal. These three words carry a weight far heavier than they seem. We cling so tightly to the illusion of stability, our routines, our relationships, our identities, as if by holding still, we can make time stop. But Schopenhauer reminds us that nothing is fixed, nothing is safe from the tide of becoming. Everything you know, everything you love is in motion, right now, shifting, aging, unraveling, becoming something else entirely. The comfort you feel today may turn to grief tomorrow. The stranger beside you might become your greatest love, or a memory that haunts you. Even the image you have of yourself is not anchored. It drifts with every thought, every experience, every quiet moment of doubt or awakening. We live in a river, not on solid ground, and while that truth terrifies, it also liberates. Because change is not just loss, it is possibility. It is rebirth wrapped in destruction. It is the breath of the universe insisting nothing stays broken, nothing stays whole, and nothing stays still. When you're trapped in despair, this truth is your rescue. When you're basking in joy, it's your warning. Either way, it humbles you. It forces you to live awake, knowing that each moment is fragile, unrepeatable, and already slipping away. Change, doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. It simply is. And once you accept its constancy, you stop fearing endings. You start cherishing beginnings. You stop trying to control the storm and start learning how to move with it. Because in the end, only one thing is permanent. Everything changes. True justice comes from compassion. True justice comes from compassion. Not from punishment, not from cold laws etched in stone, not from vengeance wrapped in ceremony, but from the trembling human heart that refuses to look away from another's suffering. Schopenhauer understood that real justice cannot be calculated. It must be felt. It begins the moment we recognize ourselves in someone else's pain and decide they matter just as much as we do. This idea is a direct challenge to the systems we worship, legal codes that treat people as statistics, institutions that separate fairness from feeling, societies that reward cruelty dressed as discipline. Without compassion, justice becomes hollow, a mechanical distribution of consequence without context, empathy, or soul. You can sentence someone, you can silence them, but if you've never stopped to ask why they broke, how they hurt, or what they needed, you haven't served justice. You've only fed the machine. Compassion changes that. It demands that we see the full picture, that we understand the wound before judging the scar, that we consider redemption, not just retribution. It does not mean excusing harm. It means refusing to answer it with blindness. Because once you feel someone's fear, their desperation, their story, you can no longer reduce them to what they've done. You begin to see who they are. True justice isn't about control. It's about connection. And only compassion can give us the courage to treat even the guilty with dignity, the broken with care, and the lost with hope. Without it, we are not just unjust. We are inhumane. Pain and boredom destroy happiness. Pain and boredom destroy happiness, not like thieves in the night, but like slow, relentless forces that eat away at the soul. Schopenhauer wasn't being poetic here. He was being surgical. He believed that these two forces are the twin terrors of human existence. Pain, the sharp reminder that life can wound us at any moment, and boredom, the hollow silence that creeps in when the wounds stop coming, but nothing meaningful fills their place. Pain is obvious. It screams through the body, through grief, through loss, through fear. It demands attention, and when it takes hold, it pushes happiness into exile. A single sharp pain, emotional or physical, can make all joy feel distant, absurd, unreachable. You could be surrounded by beauty, by love, by peace, but if pain lives in you, it blinds you to everything else. But boredom is more deceptive. It's not loud, it's empty. It's the ache that comes when nothing matters, when every day feels the same, when your life is quiet but unbearably meaningless. Boredom doesn't hurt like pain. It numbs. It dissolves your spirit in slow motion. It makes people chase chaos just to feel again. That's why some ruin good things on purpose, because even destruction feels better than the vacuum of nothing. This is the trap Schopenhauer saw in life. When we escape pain, we fall into boredom. When we flee boredom, we often run straight into pain. And in between, fleeting moments of peace, fragile, precious, and always at risk of being taken by either. Great men are solitary eagles. With this image, Schopenhauer does more than elevate the exceptional. He isolates them. The eagle soaring alone in the high, cold air does not belong to the flock. It cannot. Its vision stretches farther, its instincts are sharper, and its hunger flies beyond what others can even imagine. Greatness, real greatness, demands solitude, not as a choice, but as a condition. Because the higher one ascends in thought, purpose, or creativity, the fewer can follow. Most people live close to the ground, content with comfort, consensus, routine, but the great man is cursed to see farther, feel deeper, and strive harder. He does not fit, he does not rest. His mind is both his gift and his exile. Conversations become shallow, social games become unbearable, and the deeper he dives into his work, his vision, his calling, the more distance grows between him and the world. It's a loneliness that does not ask to be cured, because he knows that to descend, to fold his wings and join the crowd, is to lose what made him great in the first place. The solitary eagle is not lonely because he is unloved. He is lonely because no one else can breathe the air where he flies. This quote aches because we feel it, not just in the legends we admire, but in ourselves. In every moment we've outgrown our surroundings, in every thought too sharp for polite company, in every silence that felt more honest than speech. To be great is to climb alone. To stay there is to accept that no one will ever truly understand the view. The wise repeat, fools ignore. In this deceptively simple line, Schopenhauer exposes one of the most maddening patterns in human history, how truth, no matter how often spoken, must compete with noise, ego, and ignorance. Wisdom is not flashy. It doesn't shout. It whispers the same eternal lessons over and over again. Be kind, be patient, let go, look inward. But the world rarely listens, because repetition feels boring and fools crave novelty, not understanding that truth doesn't change, only our willingness to hear it does. The wise don't invent new truths just to stay interesting. They return to what matters. They speak the same truths with fresh compassion, knowing the lesson must be planted again and again in hearts that forget. They repeat because the soul needs reminding, not because it's incapable, but because it's human. Grief makes us forget peace. Desire makes us forget contentment. Ego makes us forget humility. And so the wise become the keepers of the flame, carrying ancient light into dark, distracted rooms. Fools, on the other hand, chase noise. They scoff at the familiar. They roll their eyes at old wisdom and call it outdated, until life humbles them, until consequences arrive. They ignore the repetition, not because they know better, but because they think they do. They need to be burned before they believe the fire is real. This quote isn't an insult, it's a warning. When life gives you a truth that echoes through mentors, pain, love, or silence, listen. The wise aren't boring. They're saving you from learning the hard way. Again, no pain, no meaning. It's a truth most try to deny, yet it lingers beneath every experience that ever shaped you. Schopenhauer didn't romanticize suffering. He revealed it as the furnace in which meaning is forged. Pleasure may make life sweet, but pain makes it real. It's the moments of ache, of loss, of cracking wide open that carve the deepest grooves into your soul, places where meaning can take root and grow. Think back to the moments that changed you. Were they easy? Were they soft? Or were they filled with heartbreak, disappointment, grief so heavy you could hardly breathe? Pain stretches us. It tears through illusion. It strips away everything shallow, everything unearned. And in that raw silence, where nothing feels safe or certain, you are introduced to yourself for the very first time. Without pain, joy is just noise. Without struggle, victory means nothing. We recognize what matters because it costs us something. You cherish love when it nearly breaks you. You value peace because you've drowned in chaos. Pain makes the invisible visible. It shatters comfort so truth can rise. And this is why the most meaningful lives are not the smoothest. They are the ones marked with scars. Every scar says, I was here, I felt deeply, I survived. Pain doesn't ask for permission. It arrives, unwanted. But once it's there, it whispers things comfort never could, about resilience, about depth, about what it means to live rather than just exist. No pain, no meaning, no wound, no awakening. Hope confuses desire with reality. This quote paints a dream so vividly that we start mistaking it for a promise. Schopenhauer wasn't attacking optimism. He was exposing its fragile core. Hope is not certainty. It's not truth. It's the emotional projection of what we wish will happen onto a world that never promised to comply. And yet, we cling to it desperately because letting go would mean facing the terrifying stillness of what is. Desire is the engine. We want something so badly, love, success, healing, redemption, that our mind begins to craft a version of reality where that thing exists, waiting just around the corner. We tell ourselves it's coming. We make plans for it. We build futures on it. But what if it doesn't arrive? What if the world doesn't bend to our longing? That's where the cruelty of hope lies, because when reality crashes through our illusion, when the call doesn't come, the cure doesn't appear, the person doesn't change, we're left not only with disappointment, but with a deeper kind of grief, the death of a reality we thought was already ours. Hope, in this sense, can be a form of self-deception, dressed in golden light. Yet, we keep hoping, because sometimes the imagined is all we have to carry us through the unbearable. Hope is beautiful, but it's also dangerous. It can blind us to what is, trap us in waiting, and blur the line between wishing and seeing. Schopenhauer's warning is not to kill hope, but to see it clearly and never mistake its warmth for truth. Money is abstract happiness. This quote confronts the illusion we've all been sold, that money is simply a tool, a neutral means to an end. But Schopenhauer's words cut deeper. He understood that money doesn't just represent value, it seduces us by standing in for happiness itself. It becomes the placeholder for every unfulfilled desire, every imagined comfort, every unreachable dream. We don't crave paper, we crave what we believe it will fix inside us. Money is the symbol we project our hopes onto. It promises safety, love, freedom, respect, but it never is those things. It is abstract happiness, and because of that, we chase it endlessly, thinking the number in our account is the measure of our emotional security. But it's not. It's a mirror that reflects our longing more than our joy. Desire is shapeless, and money gives it form. If we're unhappy, we tell ourselves we need more of it. If we feel small, we believe it will make us powerful. If we feel unloved, we imagine it will make us wanted. But these are illusions stitched from hope and fear, because when the money comes, the emptiness often remains, or worse, it deepens. Schopenhauer wasn't saying money is evil. He was saying it's dangerous because it's so easy to believe it holds emotional weight it can never carry. We give it the power to define our worth, control our time, even dictate our relationships. But happiness doesn't live in symbols, it lives in meaning, and no amount of abstraction can fill the place of what is deeply, painfully real. Doctors see weakness, lawyers wickedness. Doctors see weakness, lawyers wickedness. With this cutting insight, Schopenhauer unmasked the hidden truths professionals come to know about human nature, not through theory, but through intimate, repeated exposure to the rawest parts of us. A doctor doesn't just see the body, they see its breaking point. They see how fragile we are beneath the surface, the trembling hands, the failing hearts, the diseases we hide until it's too late. Over time, they stop believing in the illusion of invincibility. They learn that beneath our confidence and pride, we are all flesh, all vulnerable, all afraid of time. And lawyers don't just interpret the law. They witness the darkest games people play with it. They see greed twist into lawsuits, families torn apart over money, lies crafted to manipulate justice. They see how cunning and cruelty aren't rare exceptions, but recurring patterns. They learn that beneath polished language and respectable faces, there is often manipulation, betrayal, and the quiet hunger to win, no matter the cost. This quote doesn't mock these professions, it reveals their burden. Because to do their jobs well, doctors and lawyers must stop looking at people through idealism. They must see clearly, even when what they see is painful. And that clarity becomes a kind of sorrow, a constant reminder that beneath every social smile lies something far more complicated. Schopenhauer's words pull us into an uncomfortable truth. Those who see us up close rarely find glory. They find weakness, they find wickedness, and somehow They have to keep helping us anyway. Will is blind, intellect sees. There is a force inside you that wants without reason, that reaches without direction, that pulls you toward things with a hunger that feels ancient and unstoppable. That force is the will, and it is blind. It doesn't ask whether what you desire is good or right or safe. It doesn't weigh consequences. It doesn't wait for clarity. It simply wants. It is raw, instinctive, and relentless. And most of us live our lives being quietly controlled by it. Schopenhauer's words cut to the core of this inner tension. Will is blind. Intellect sees. The will is your craving for more love, more power, more validation, more sensation. It's the restless ache in your chest that never truly goes away. It is the part of you that acts before thinking, that desires before understanding, that chases shadows hoping they'll become solid. But the intellect is what can see. It observes, it reflects, it recognizes the trap before you step in. It can distinguish between what is necessary and what is merely noise. But too often, it speaks too softly, too late, because when the will takes over, the intellect becomes an afterthought, a servant force to justify decisions it didn't make. This is why people ruin relationships they treasure, why they pursue things that leave them empty, why they sabotage the very peace they claim to want. Because the will does not care about peace, it only cares about motion, and until you awaken your intellect and let it lead, you will keep stumbling through life with your eyes closed, calling it fate. Life is a tragedy in summary. Life is a tragedy in summary. When we're living it day by day, moment by moment, it rarely feels that way. There are joys, there are thrills, there are seasons of laughter and dreams that bloom into reality. We fall in love. We make friends. We build lives that feel permanent, sturdy, filled with meaning. But when you step back, when you look at it all from a distance, stripped of illusions, there is a quiet, brutal truth. Everything ends. Everyone leaves. Everything you love will either be taken from you or you will be taken from it. And in that way, the story of life is not a comedy. It is not a victory march. It is a slow, beautiful, heartbreaking unraveling. Schopenhauer's words do not deny the beauty in life. They depend on it, because tragedy only exists when something meaningful is lost. What makes life tragic is not its darkness. It's that we dared to hope, dared to love, dared to build in a world where time devours all things. The tragedy is in knowing that every beginning contains its ending. Every embrace is temporary. Every heartbeat ticks closer to silence. And yet, we live, we create art, we sing, we laugh with people we'll one day mourn. Maybe that's the most powerful part, that we still choose to care, knowing how it ends, that we still tell our stories, even as they become elegies. Schopenhauer doesn't mock life. He reveres it in its most raw, most painful, most honest form, a tragedy, and one we dare to live anyway. Great souls live alone. This quote is not a celebration of isolation. It is a solemn acknowledgement of the cost of depth. When Schopenhauer said, "Great souls live alone," he wasn't praising loneliness. He was telling the truth about what happens when a person sees too much, feels too deeply, and thinks too far beyond the boundaries that most others stay safely inside. Greatness, in any form, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, creates distance, not by choice but by inevitability. The deeper you go into truth, the less company you find. Most people don't want to look into the abyss. They don't want to question the scripts they live by, or confront the fragility of life, or feel the unbearable weight of beauty and suffering at once. But great souls do. They can't help it. Their minds don't settle for easy answers. Their hearts refuse to grow numb. And in that searching, in that endless hunger for something more real, they slowly drift from the crowd. There is a silence that follows awakening, a quiet that few understand. Great souls walk through rooms full of noise and feel alone, not because they are better, but because they are tuned differently, And sometimes the world treats that difference as a defect. It labels them distant, difficult, cold. But beneath that stillness is not indifference, it's magnitude, a soul too vast to fit inside the usual rhythms of small talk and surface living. Schopenhauer knew, the higher the peak, the fewer who stand upon it. And greatness, true greatness, often echoes in solitude, not out of arrogance, but because there is simply no one else there. Religion trains minds. Religion trains minds. Schopenhauer does not whisper this. He declares it, unafraid of the discomfort it brings. Religion is not just a belief system. It is an instrument of mental conditioning, a centuries-old structure designed not merely to offer answers, but to shape the very way people think. From childhood, before a child can reason or rebel, stories are woven into their psyche of sin and salvation, heaven and hell, reward and punishment. These narratives settle deep, not as options to consider, but as truths to obey. And that is the power of religion, not in its symbols or rituals, but in its capacity to direct thought before thought ever learns to question. It tells you what is sacred, what is forbidden, what is worthy of love, and what must be feared. It becomes the lens through which entire generations view morality, purpose, suffering, and self-worth. To question it feels like betrayal. To walk away feels like exile. Schopenhauer saw religion not simply as spiritual guidance, but as a tool of social order, a way to domesticate minds, to keep chaos at bay by installing belief systems that resist scrutiny. It teaches conformity dressed as virtue. It punishes curiosity with guilt. And all of it, he suggests, happens so quietly, so early, that by the time you're old enough to question, you've already become what it made you. This quote isn't rage, it's revelation. Religion doesn't just comfort, it programs. And once you realize your thoughts have been trained, you start to wonder which ones are truly yours. Loss reveals worth. You don't know what something truly means to you until the moment it's no longer there. This is the cruel honesty Schopenhauer lays bare when he says loss reveals worth. As long as something exists in your daily life, be it a person, a feeling, a routine, you grow used to it. You assume it will be there tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. But loss has a way of burning clarity into the heart in a way presence never could. We mistake consistency for permanence. We confuse the ordinary for the unimportant, and so we carry on, half aware, until the moment the goodbye arrives. Sometimes it's loud, sometimes it's slow, but it always leaves a silence that echoes louder than any presence ever did. That silence is where the truth lives, the truth that what we lost was more sacred than we ever let ourselves feel. This is why grief is more than sorrow. It's a mirror. It shows you everything you missed while you were busy, distracted, numb. The last conversation, the laughter you didn't notice, the habit that used to annoy you, now aching to return. In that hollow space where something used to be, your soul begins to see, really see, what it meant to you. Schopenhauer doesn't just describe a phenomenon. He exposes a flaw in how we love, how we live. We only realize the value of light when we are swallowed in darkness. We only bow to beauty once it's vanished, and by then, the lesson is learned too late, but never forgotten. Each day is a life. Each day is a life. Schopenhauer doesn't just offer a poetic turn of phrase. He delivers a quiet truth that, if truly felt, can shake you awake. Think about it. Every morning you rise from darkness as if reborn. Every night you fall back into oblivion as if dying. What happens in between isn't just a day. It's an entire existence lived in miniature. A beginning, a middle, an end. We treat days like throwaways, as if they're infinite. We say, tomorrow I'll start, or this doesn't matter, it's just one day. But that day is a life, a full breath of being. And if you waste it, if you spend it numb, angry, distracted, or disconnected, you don't just waste time. You waste the only version of yourself that ever existed on that particular page of the universe. This quote slices through procrastination, through apathy, through the quiet decay of ordinary routine. It demands urgency, not the frantic rush of productivity, but the sacred awareness that this moment matters, that what you say to the people you love today matters, that the way you speak to yourself, the choices you make, the silences you sit in, they are not rehearsal, they are your life. And maybe that's the most haunting part. We die a little every evening, and we don't get that particular life back, but we're also reborn every morning, handed the gift of a new self to shape, a new story to tell. The question is, will you live this one, or let it die unlived? Reading is borrowed thinking. This quote tears away the comfort we often wrap around intellectual consumption. Schopenhauer isn't dismissing reading. He's exposing what it actually is, an act of absorbing someone else's thoughts, conclusions, and inner world. When we read, we are not thinking for ourselves. We are walking a path someone else has already carved. We are borrowing a mind. And while that can be enlightening, it can also be deceptive, because borrowed thinking feels like our own until we're forced to stand alone without it. Reading is easier than thinking. It's safer. It gives the illusion of depth without demanding the terror of facing silence, confusion, or the unknown. But real thought, original thought, comes from sitting in that silence, from wrestling with contradiction, from daring to doubt even the ideas that feel sacred. Reading gives us voices to admire, to model, to challenge. But if we only ever read, we become an echo, not a mind. We live in an age where we consume information endlessly. Articles, essays, quotes, captions. We gorge on insight, but rarely pause to digest it into wisdom. Schopenhauer's warning is sharp. If you don't learn to think without the crutch of another's voice, you may know much and understand nothing. You may repeat brilliance without ever feeling it. Reading is a beginning, not a destination. It should awaken thought, not replace it, because when the book closes and the noise fades, your real mind begins. And if you've never exercised it, never questioned, never created, what will be left when the borrowed thinking is gone? Let art speak first. Let art speak first. In this quiet command, Schopenhauer captures something sacred about human expression, something too often lost in a world obsessed with explanation and control. Before you analyze a painting, before you decode a poem, before you tear apart a piece of music to understand its structure, stop, feel it, let it speak to you, let it move you in ways that have no words, because true art does not exist to be explained. It exists to be felt. Art is the language of the unconscious. It bypasses logic and penetrates something deeper, something primal, emotional, raw. It touches the parts of us that don't respond to argument, but awaken at the sound of beauty or truth. And when we rush to interpret before we experience, we kill the very thing that gives art its power. We turn it into an object instead of an encounter. We flatten it into meaning when its real power is in mystery. Schopenhauer believed art was a glimpse into the eternal, a moment where we are freed from our restless desires and simply see. But that seeing requires stillness, surrender, the courage to feel without needing to explain, to stand before something beautiful or painful or strange and allow it to say what it wants to say, not what we want to hear. This quote is not about silence, it's about reverence. It's about giving art the space to do what nothing else can, awaken something honest in us before we have the chance to shut it down. Let it speak. Then, maybe, try to understand. Life's shortness is a gift. Life's shortness is a gift. At first, this sounds cruel. How could the fleeting nature of our existence be anything but a curse? We scramble to hold on, to stretch our days, to delay the inevitable. Death haunts us, aging mocks us, and every goodbye carries the ache of finality. But Schopenhauer, with brutal honesty and deep tenderness, reminds us it's precisely because life is short that it becomes meaningful. If we lived forever, we would never wake up. The clock ticking isn't your enemy, it's your teacher. It whispers that no moment will return, that every embrace is sacred, that every word you choose not to say might stay forever unsaid. It's the shortness that makes now burn so brightly. The fact that you only get one morning with this sunrise, one chance to look into someone's eyes and say what you've been afraid to, one brief beating life to feel everything. If time were endless, there would be no urgency to love, no reason to forgive, no courage to begin. We would wait and delay and postpone our joy. But life doesn't wait, and that's its brutal beauty. Its brevity is a flame. It forces you to feel, to act, to care. This quote doesn't glorify death. It honors life by reminding you that it's not a dress rehearsal. The shortness is what gives it shape. It is the crack in the vessel that makes the wine taste sweeter. Life ends, but that's what makes it yours. Completely, unbearably, magnificently yours. Needs arise from imagination. Needs arise from imagination. Schopenhauer pierces through the surface of desire with this chilling observation, revealing how easily the mind confuses fantasy for necessity. We are not driven solely by what keeps us alive. We are driven by what we think will complete us. What begins as a passing thought, a picture, a dream, a comparison, blooms into a craving so strong it feels like survival. But it isn't. It's a ghost the mind invented, then mistook for truth. You didn't need the newer car until someone else drove it. You didn't need the perfect body until a screen showed you what perfection looked like. You didn't need that lifestyle, that approval, that status, until imagination conjured a version of your life that didn't exist and told you it should. This is the trap. The mind creates a vision, and the heart aches to reach it. And that ache becomes suffering, not because you lack something essential, but because you believe you're not enough without the imagined thing. Desire, then, becomes a prison made of illusions, and the more vivid the imagination, the more convincing the need. This quote is not a rejection of ambition or dreams. It's a warning, a call to awaken, to question every urge that dresses itself as need, to ask, did I want this before I saw it, before I compared, before I imagined myself without it? Because if the answer is no, then it's not a need, it's a shadow, and chasing shadows will always leave you feeling empty, even when your hands are full. Knowledge begins in mystery. Before understanding, before logic, before answers, there is the ache of not knowing. That ache is sacred. Schopenhauer reminds us that everything we truly come to know begins not with certainty, but with a haunting question, a flicker of wonder, a silence that demands to be broken. It's the feeling you get staring at the night sky as a child, realizing how vast it is and how small you are. It's the shiver that runs through you when something familiar suddenly feels strange, alive, unknown. Mystery is the womb of every idea. It is the darkness from which light is born, and yet we are taught to fear it, to rush past it, to replace it with answers, any answers, because not knowing feels like weakness. But Schopenhauer saw what many forget, that the most powerful knowledge never eliminates mystery. It deepens it. It draws us closer to the edge of the infinite and asks us to stare longer, not to solve, but to feel awe. Real thinkers don't seek to end questions. They fall in love with them. The greatest minds weren't driven by conclusions, but by wonder that refused to die. And every time we pretend to know too soon, we cheat ourselves of something profound, the humility that comes with being human. Mystery is not the absence of knowledge, it is its birthplace. And when we forget that, we stop discovering, we stop feeling, we trade wonder for facts, and in doing so, lose the spark that made us reach for the stars in the first place. A face says more than words. A face says more than words. In this piercing truth, Schopenhauer reveals that beneath the polished surface of language lies something rawer, more honest, and infinitely harder to fake. Words can be rehearsed. They can be charming, strategic, even manipulative. But the face, your eyes, your expressions, the stillness or tension in your muscles, it betrays the soul before the tongue ever has a chance to intervene. You can say, "I'm fine," 1,000 times, but grief still gathers in the corners of your eyes. You can say, "I love you," yet your mouth might tremble with hesitation your words can't hide. A face carries the unedited version of you. It reflects your suffering, your longing, your joy, and even the parts of yourself you haven't dared to admit. People may not consciously interpret it, but they feel it. In the silence between sentences, in the fleeting flicker of expression, entire truths are spoken. And unlike words, the face doesn't lie easily. This is why we remember someone's face long after we forget what they said, why the look of heartbreak, awe, or betrayal is burned into memory deeper than any letter or phrase. In the human face is the echo of ancient emotion, pre-verbal, universal, undeniable. It is the one language we're all born understanding. Schopenhauer's insight pulls away the illusion that language is our highest form of connection. It's not. It's what comes before language. The trembling jaw, the weary gaze, the smile that doesn't reach the eyes, that reveals who we really are. And it speaks whether we want it to or not. We lose ourselves copying others. This is one of the most quietly devastating truths Schopenhauer ever laid bare, because we don't even notice it happening. We mimic to fit in, to be loved, to feel safe. It begins innocently enough, dressing like someone we admire, adopting their tone, reshaping our beliefs to match the crowd. We think we're evolving, we think we're blending in, but inch by inch, compromise by compromise, we abandon who we really are, and we don't even mourn the loss because we're too busy being accepted. The tragedy is that the more we imitate, the more hollow we become. Our uniqueness fades beneath layers of borrowed voices, recycled opinions, and artificial personalities. We feel disconnected and empty, not realizing we've been feeding everyone else's reflection instead of nourishing our own identity. There's a slow, aching death that comes from ignoring your inner compass, and eventually, when the noise quiets, you're left wondering, whose life am I even living? We copy others to escape judgment, but in doing so, we invite a deeper pain, the grief of betraying ourselves. We laugh when we don't find things funny. We chase goals that never belong to us. We fear rejection so deeply, we forget we once had a voice that was our own. Schopenhauer doesn't condemn imitation out of arrogance. He warns us because he knows the price. You can spend your whole life being someone they'll accept, but the moment you stop pretending, you might finally meet the person you were meant to be. And maybe, just maybe, that person is worth the risk. Death is a return to the state before birth. Schopenhauer doesn't cloak mortality in comforting illusions. He rips away the fear and sentimentality and offers something quieter, something almost peaceful. Death isn't chaos. It's not fire or punishment or reward. It's simply nothing, just as it was before we ever existed. We fear it only because we have forgotten that we've already known it. We lived in non-existence for eternity before our birth, and we weren't afraid then. Why be afraid now? This perspective is disarming. It doesn't diminish grief, but it dissolves terror. The state of not being isn't a punishment. It is the default. It is the silence that came before every heartbeat, every breath, every moment you ever loved. And it will be the silence that follows. What Schopenhauer suggests is that life is a brief flicker of awareness framed by two infinite oceans of stillness. We emerge, burn brightly, then return. The tragedy then is not death, but that we spend so much of life afraid of it. We forget to live because we're too busy dreading what's inevitable and already known. But death is not an intruder. It is home. It is where we came from and where we go and where we've always been, just without the noise of thought, without the pressure of time, without the ache of longing. This quote isn't meant to strip life of meaning. It's meant to remind you that your existence is a rare and sacred accident, one you didn't ask for and one you won't repeat. And that is exactly why it matters. Great ideas are born into resistance. Great ideas are born into resistance. They do not arrive to applause or understanding. They come into the world like misfits, uninvited, unrecognized, and often unwanted. Schopenhauer's insight that great ideas meet doubt is not just a commentary on society's ignorance, it's a reflection of fear, because the moment a truly new idea emerges, it threatens the comfort of what is known, and people will do anything to protect their illusions, even if it means killing the very thing that could free them. Think of every revolutionary thought that now seems obvious. At one time, it was heresy, madness, laughed at, punished, cast aside, the earth revolving around the sun, the end of slavery, equal rights. Each of these truths, now pillars, were once spit upon. Why? Because the mind is wired for safety, and safety lives in repetition. Great ideas break patterns. They shatter certainty. They ask people to see differently, and that's terrifying. Even worse, the ones who carry these ideas often walk alone. Visionaries are not praised. They are doubted, attacked, dismissed. Their minds are ahead of their time, and that time takes its toll. The path of the original thinker is not glory, it is exile. Schopenhauer doesn't romanticize genius, he exposes its cost. To carry a great idea is to be misunderstood, sometimes hated, always doubted, until the day the world finally sees what you saw all along. But by then, the pain of resistance will already have shaped the soul behind the vision, and still, they dared to speak. Friends open doors. In this simple truth, Schopenhauer captures something many don't admit, yet everyone lives. Friendship is not just emotional, it's existential. Beyond comfort or shared laughter, friends change your trajectory. They introduce you to people, to ideas, to moments you would never have reached alone. The right friend doesn't just stand beside you, they point you towards something more, a version of yourself you hadn't yet imagined, a path you didn't know existed. We like to think we carve our own way, that we are self-made, but quietly, invisibly, it is often the hand of a friend that turns the key when life feels locked, a conversation that sparks something dormant, a connection that leads to opportunity, a voice that says, "You can," when the world only says, "You can't." That is the door, open not by force, but by love, trust, belief. Schopenhauer knew the dark side of human nature. He wrote often of solitude, betrayal, and the cruelty people are capable of. So when he speaks of friendship, it isn't naive, it's reverent, because for someone who saw so much suffering, to say friends open doors is to confess there is light, there is hope, there are people whose presence does not drain, but expands you, and that is rare, it is precious. Some doors you can't kick open, some you can't even see, but a true friend, sometimes just by being there, walks ahead, turns the knob, and suddenly, your world is bigger than it was a moment before. Don't lose honor. In an age obsessed with winning, with appearing right rather than being true, this command from Schopenhauer strikes with unsettling clarity. Honor is not reputation. It is not applause. It is not the version of you others see. It is the version you live with when no one is watching. Honor is the quiet voice inside that tells you whether you're still whole. And once it's gone, no amount of success, forgiveness, or reinvention can fully bring it back. To lose honor is to betray yourself, to trade what is right for what is easy, to bend your values for approval, profit, or comfort. The damage doesn't just live in the consequences, it lives in you. It corrodes your sense of self. You might smile, move on, tell yourself it didn't matter. But part of you knows. Part of you remembers the exact moment you looked away, from who you were meant to be. And that's what makes honor sacred. It's fragile. It doesn't scream for attention. It simply disappears when neglected. People spend years trying to rebuild the self-respect they lost in a single moment of weakness. Others walk around with everything, wealth, power, admiration, but carry a secret emptiness they can't name. That's the absence of honor, and it echoes louder than guilt. Schopenhauer isn't moralizing. He's warning. The world may tempt you to compromise, to silence your integrity for gain, but the cost is too high. Don't lose honor, because once you've abandoned it, nothing you gain will ever feel like enough. We focus on lack, not because we're ungrateful or broken, but because the mind is wired to notice what's missing. It's ancient, primal, rooted in survival. But in the modern world, that wiring becomes torment. You could have 1,000 things going right: health, love, safety, opportunity. But the one thing you don't have, that's where your mind goes. That's the thing that keeps you awake at night, makes you feel small, fuels the silent ache that whispers not enough. Schopenhauer understood this deeply. He knew that the human heart rarely basks in abundance. It scans for voids. It doesn't marvel at what is, it mourns what could be. This is why joy is fleeting and dissatisfaction lingers. We look at others and see what they have, measuring ourselves by illusions. We overlook blessings until they vanish and chase fantasies believing they'll complete us. This obsession with lack distorts our vision. It makes us miss beauty while it's happening. It tricks us into believing happiness lives in the next thing, the next person, the next version of ourselves. And so we live in pursuit, never presence, in yearning, never peace. But this quote isn't just an observation. It's a mirror. It asks, what would change if you stopped defining your life by its absences? What would you feel if you turned your gaze to what's here, not what's missing? The truth is, contentment doesn't come from gaining more. It comes from seeing more, especially the things you've already been given, but taught yourself to ignore. Happiness is internal. Schopenhauer doesn't mean this as a cliche or a feel-good affirmation. He means it as a brutal, undeniable fact. The world will lie to you. It will tell you happiness lives in achievement, in admiration, in possessions. That once you get the job, the house, the lover, the approval, you'll finally be okay. But those things are mirrors, not sources. They reflect what's inside, but they can't create it. Because real happiness doesn't come from anything. It comes through you, or not at all. We've all seen it. The person who has everything and still drowns in emptiness. The person with little who radiates peace. This isn't luck, it's truth. When your mind is restless, nothing will satisfy it. When your soul is unsettled, the whole world will feel like a prison. But when there is calm within you, when you are enough for yourself, suddenly the noise of the world fades into the background. The tragedy is how long it takes most of us to learn this. We chase endlessly, only to realize we've been running in circles around something that was always inside us. The external world can please you, excite you, even distract you, but it cannot save you from yourself, and it cannot fill the silence that echoes when you're alone. Schopenhauer's words aren't soft. They demand responsibility. If happiness is internal, no one can give it to you, and no one can take it away, which means the journey isn't out there, it's in the mirror. And the hardest part is daring to look. Use common words for deep things. With this quiet command, Schopenhauer dismantles the arrogance so often found in intellectual circles, the belief that depth requires complexity, that wisdom must wear the armor of elite vocabulary. But true understanding doesn't hide behind ornate language. It breathes in clarity. It whispers through simplicity. It lives where anyone can reach it. The deepest truths, the ones that shape us, break us, heal us, are not complicated. Love, loss, time, death. They are ancient primal forces felt by every heart, not just the educated ones. When we bury them in jargon or abstraction, we don't make them wiser. We make them distant. We turn living emotion into cold theory. and in doing so, we lose something sacred, the ability to connect. Schopenhauer understood that when you strip language down to its essence, what's left is power. Say, I miss you, not I experience emotional dissonance. Say, I'm scared, not I find myself in an existential state of uncertainty. Simplicity doesn't weaken the message, it sharpens it. It pierces through defenses, it lands in the gut, not just the mind. There's a certain bravery in using common words. You can't hide behind them. You can't impress with them. All you can do is tell the truth, and that's what makes them so disarming, so human. This quote is not just advice. It's a call to speak like someone who feels, to speak like someone who bleeds, because when you dare to say something profound in a way that anyone can understand, you aren't just sharing knowledge, you're creating meaning. Every person is unique. Every person is unique. It sounds simple, almost too obvious to matter, but within this quiet truth lies an emotional depth that many never fully grasp. In a world obsessed with categories, comparisons, and conformity, the idea that no two souls are the same is both liberating and deeply isolating. You are a singular constellation of memories, pain, dreams, and fears, never before seen, never to be repeated. No one else has lived your exact heartbreak. No one else has carried your precise blend of joy and sorrow, and no one ever will. We spend so much of our lives trying to fit in, shaving off the rough edges of who we are to match the shape of expectation. We hide our quirks, dim our colors, mimic what's accepted, but in doing so, we smother the one thing we truly have to offer, our individuality. Schopenhauer reminds us that within each person exists an entire world, one the world itself often forgets to see. And yet, this uniqueness can be a quiet agony, because if no one is like you, who will truly understand you? Who will fully see you without translation or apology? This is why loneliness exists even in crowds, because your soul doesn't come with subtitles. Still, it is this very solitude that makes connection so profound. When someone does understand, even in part, it feels like a miracle. To realize every person is unique is to treat others and yourself with reverence, because beneath every face is a world fighting to be seen, and behind every smile is a story only they can tell. Morality equals compassion. With this piercing equation, Schopenhauer strips away centuries of complex philosophy and religious doctrine, leaving us face to face with the raw, undeniable core of what it means to be good. It's not about laws, not about dogma, not about virtue signaling or rigid principles. It is about one thing, the capacity to feel the pain of another and care enough to respond. Without compassion, morality is performance. With it, even silence becomes sacred. Compassion doesn't require education, status, or belief. It rises from the most vulnerable part of the human heart, the part that recognizes suffering in others and instinctively reaches out. It's what makes a stranger stop to help, what makes a mother sacrifice without thought, what makes one soul look at another and see themselves. And that is morality, not because it follows rules, but because it honors connection. Schopenhauer knew that without compassion, morality turns cold. It becomes punishment without understanding, judgment without love, a checklist for superiority. That's why history is full of moral codes used to justify cruelty, exclusion, and hatred. But compassion, it never condemns, it never divides, it feels, and in feeling, it binds us to each other in ways no law ever could. This quote isn't philosophical fluff, it's a challenge, because compassion costs something. It asks you to break open, to care even when it's inconvenient, to suffer alongside others even when you could walk away. But that's where morality begins. Not in being right, but in being moved. And without that movement of the heart, morality is just an empty word. Intellect isolates. Intellect isolates. It's not because intelligent people want to be alone, it's because they have to be. The sharper the mind, the harder it becomes to find someone who truly sees you. Deep thought pulls you inward into layers of questioning, analysis, and perception that most people never touch. And the more you think, the more distance grows between you and the surface level conversations, the easy answers, the scripted roles society hands out like uniforms. Schopenhauer wasn't praising intellect, he was mourning its cost. To understand the world more deeply is to feel its absurdity more sharply, to see through social masks, to notice the patterns of illusion and denial people cling to is to feel profoundly alone in rooms full of laughter. Intellect doesn't just isolate, it alienates. It makes you the observer when you desperately want to belong. And it's not superiority, it's sorrow. The intellectually awakened are not looking down on others. They're longing for someone who speaks their language, someone who asks, "What else is there?" instead of, "Why can't you just be normal?" This loneliness is not loud. It's a quiet ache that follows the realization that most people fear depth, that small talk is survival, that comfort often requires blindness. So the intellectual retreats, not out of arrogance, but out of exhaustion, not because they don't care, but because they care too much to keep pretending. To see clearly is a gift. To be unseen because of it, that is the price. And many would trade brilliance for connection, if only connection didn't demand the dulling of the light. Truth, ridiculed, resisted, accepted. Truth, ridiculed, resisted, accepted. In this piercing sequence, Schopenhauer lays bare the lonely path that all great truths must walk before they are embraced. It begins with ridicule, a laugh, a scoff, a dismissal. When a new truth first emerges, it threatens what people already believe, and humans, terrified of uncertainty, mock what they don't understand. It's easier to reduce something to a joke than to admit it might shatter the foundation you've built your life on. But the ridicule doesn't last. It evolves into resistance. Now the truth is no longer funny. It's dangerous. It challenges systems, identities, power structures. It forces people to look in the mirror and ask questions they've spent years avoiding. So they fight. Institutions reject it. Experts deny it. Friends pull away. And the one who carries the truth walks through fire, alone, demonized for seeing too soon what others refuse to see at all. Yet if the truth survives this crucifixion, if it endures mockery and outlives the fear, it arrives at a final stage, acceptance. Quietly, society begins to nod. The laughter fades. The opposition loses its fury. People begin to say, "Of course, that was obvious all along," but it wasn't. It never is, because every truth that now feels self-evident once felt like heresy. Every belief you hold now about love, equality, science, freedom was once hated for existing. This quote is a timeline carved into human resistance, and when you speak something that others aren't ready to hear, remember, their laughter is just the first step toward one day calling it obvious. Opinion swings like a pendulum. Opinion swings like a pendulum. One moment it praises, the next it condemns. Today you're admired, tomorrow you're irrelevant. Public sentiment isn't grounded. It floats, sways, crashes, and reverses with time, trends, and emotion. Schopenhauer knew this instability well, and with this quote, he strips away the illusion that what people think is steady or even sincere. What we call opinion is often nothing more than emotional weather, changing with the slightest wind, responding not to truth, but to feeling, to herd instinct, to fashion. This is why chasing validation is a cruel game, because even when you get it, it doesn't stay. You may be adored today, not because you're right or real, but because your story fits what people want to believe right now. But just wait, shadows fall, narratives change, and suddenly you're on the other side of the pendulum, rejected, mocked, forgotten. What's terrifying is how quickly this swing can occur. A single mistake, a rumor, a shift in cultural mood, and you're no longer the hero. You're the fool. And then, just as irrationally, admiration may return, not because you changed, but because the pendulum did. This cycle leaves you dizzy unless you stop depending on it, unless you ground yourself in something stronger than the crowd. Schopenhauer's quote is more than observation. It's a survival tactic. Know that opinion is fickle, and you won't lose yourself to it. Let the pendulum swing. Let it pass over you. Because when your worth isn't anchored to the applause or judgment of others, you're finally free. Wealth increases thirst. Wealth increases thirst. It's one of Schopenhauer's most devastating insights, not because it condemns desire, but because it exposes its endless hunger. We chase wealth thinking it will quench us, fill the void, silence the fear of not having enough. And for a moment, it does. The first win, the first luxury, the first taste of power. But then something strange happens. The satisfaction fades, and in its place grows a deeper craving, not just for more, but for more than before. This is the paradox no one warns you about, that the richer you become, materially, socially, even emotionally, the more aware you are of what you don't yet have. The appetite expands faster than the fulfillment. Every gain moves the finish line. Every indulgence becomes normal. Every goal, once achieved, becomes insufficient. Wealth doesn't calm the mind. It fuels the illusion that just one more will finally be enough. And yet, we keep running, not because we're greedy monsters, but because the thirst feels real. It feels urgent. It feels like survival. But it isn't. It's the echo of an emptiness that can't be filled with things. Schopenhauer isn't shaming desire. He's warning that without reflection, wealth becomes a trap disguised as freedom, a golden leash tightening around the soul. To chase wealth without self-awareness is to drink salt water in a burning desert. You get more and somehow feel less. And the more you accumulate, the more terrified you become of losing it. Wealth was supposed to be the reward, but it often becomes the prison, because thirst never ends where the heart is hollow. Monologue reveals soul. Monologue reveals soul. In silence, with no one to impress, no script to follow, no audience to please, your truest self begins to speak. Schopenhauer understood that the most honest conversations are not between people, but within the solitude of your own mind. That voice in your head, the one that doesn't lie when the world is quiet, that's the one revealing who you are, not who you pretend to be, not who the world expects, but the raw, aching, unfiltered soul beneath all performance. When you're alone, the masks fall, the ego softens. There's no need to sound smart or kind or happy. That's when your thoughts take off their armor and show you everything you've hidden, even from yourself. Regrets surface, longings whisper, fears scream, dreams you buried years ago tug gently at your attention. The monologue doesn't care about status or appearance. It cares only about truth. And that's why so many fear being alone, not because they don't enjoy their own company, but because they dread what might rise in the stillness. Most people drown that voice in noise, distractions, or endless interaction. But the brave ones, they listen. They let the monologue unfold, even when it hurts, because in that inner dialogue lies your essence, the real story beneath all the roles you've played. Schopenhauer wasn't romanticizing loneliness. He was pointing to its power. If you want to know someone, don't watch how they act in a crowd. Watch how they speak to themselves when no one's listening. That's not just thought. That's soul, uncovered. Life swings between pain and boredom. Life swings between pain and boredom. In this grim yet disturbingly accurate reflection, Schopenhauer doesn't soften the truth. He strips it bare. He tells us that human existence is not built on joy, but on two poles of suffering, the agony of wanting and the emptiness of having. When we long for something, love, success, purpose, we ache. We hurt in the space between where we are and where we crave to be. And when we finally get it, that burning desire goes quiet and leaves behind a silence we call boredom. We are rarely content. When in pain, we plead for peace. When at peace, we reach for stimulation. It's a pendulum. The moment things become stable, predictable, safe, they also become dull. That's why even the lives we envy, filled with comfort, beauty, privilege, are often riddled with restlessness, because the human spirit is wired not for satisfaction, but for movement, craving, and struggle. Without it, we stagnate. Schopenhauer's brutal insight reveals why happiness feels so fleeting. It's not because we don't deserve it, it's because our minds are built to escape it. They lurch forward into fear or backward into longing, and even when life gives us everything, we invent problems just to feel something. This quote doesn't tell you to despair, it tells you to wake up, to stop chasing perfection or permanence, because when you know the swing is inevitable, you stop waiting for a place of eternal peace, and you start learning how to dance between the two ends without losing yourself in either. Solitude builds strength. Solitude builds strength. In a world addicted to noise, Schopenhauer dares to honor the silence. Not loneliness, not isolation, but solitude, the sacred space where the self stops performing and starts becoming. It is in solitude that we face the full weight of who we are, without distractions, without validation, without anyone to impress. And that is terrifying, because in that mirror of stillness, everything surfaces, our doubts, our pain, our forgotten dreams, but so does our power. Most people run from solitude because it feels like emptiness, but the wise know it's not a void, it's a forge. It's where the mind sharpens and the soul strengthens. When you are alone, there is no one to lie to, no one to save you. You must dig deeper. You must learn to hold your own heart when it breaks, to calm your mind when it spins, to create joy in the absence of applause. And what emerges from that process is something unshakable, inner gravity. Solitude strips away the need to be seen and replaces it with the ability to see. You begin to think your own thoughts instead of echoing others. You become comfortable in your own company, not because it's easier, but because you've built a home inside yourself, a place that cannot be stolen, betrayed, or abandoned. Schopenhauer wasn't romanticizing detachment. He was revealing where real strength is born, not in crowds, not in conquest, but in the quiet hours when no one's watching, and you choose to face yourself instead of fleeing. Solitude doesn't make you hard, it makes you whole. Fate is mostly stupidity. Fate is mostly stupidity. At first glance, Schopenhauer's words feel irreverent, almost dismissive of the grand, mysterious forces we like to blame for our lives. But look closer, and you'll see the raw, uncomfortable truth he's unearthing. Most of what we call fate is not destiny. It's carelessness, impulsiveness, pride, or blind habit. We romanticize outcomes to avoid responsibility. We say, it was meant to be, when in reality, it was just a choice we didn't fully understand, or a consequence we didn't want to own. The job you didn't get wasn't fate. It was the opportunity you didn't prepare for. The relationship that shattered wasn't written in the stars. It was neglected, misunderstood, or chosen for the wrong reasons. The regret that haunts you might not be karma. It might just be a moment where your better judgment was drowned out by impulse or fear. Schopenhauer isn't mocking suffering. He's demanding honesty. He's saying, don't look to fate for answers when the truth is closer to home. Most people drift through life half awake, letting fear steer, letting ego speak, letting patterns repeat, and then act surprised when they end up in places they never meant to go. They call it fate, but really, it was just a string of unexamined decisions. This quote isn't cynical, it's empowering, because if fate is mostly stupidity, then awareness is salvation, then mindfulness is power, then every moment, every choice is a chance to rewrite the ending. Fate doesn't have to happen to you, it can begin to happen through you, but only if you stop pretending you're not holding the pen. Books build civilization, Books build civilization. Schopenhauer understood that ink on a page is not just knowledge, it's inheritance. Every book is a message in a bottle sent across time, a piece of one mind preserved so that others may grow. Without books, memory dies with the person. Without books, each generation starts from nothing. But with them, we build, layer by layer, thought by thought, a world shaped by the wisdom, questions, and revelations of those who came before. Books are not luxury, they are survival. They carry the blueprints of empathy, the foundations of law, the architecture of art and science. Every moral code, every great idea, every revolution began as a whisper in someone's mind and found permanence on a page. Books make it possible for a dead philosopher to shape the thoughts of a teenager 200 years later. They collapse time, they defeat death. To read is not just to learn, it is to become. You step into minds not your own. You see through eyes that lived in other centuries, other cultures, other wounds. That is how civilization expands, not just in technology, but in understanding. Empires rise and fall, monuments decay. But books outlive fire, war, exile, and silence. They carry the soul of humanity. Schopenhauer's words are a reminder that every library is a cathedral, every page a brick in the shelter of civilization. If we ever forget that, if we stop reading, stop writing, stop passing forward what matters, we don't just lose stories, we lose ourselves. Because civilization isn't built with steel, it's built with thought, and books are where thought survives. Patriotism is folly. Patriotism is folly. With this searing declaration, Schopenhauer cuts into one of humanity's most celebrated emotions and exposes the madness it so often conceals. He's not attacking love for one's home or appreciation for culture. He's revealing how easily those feelings harden into blind allegiance, into the dangerous illusion that one's nation is inherently superior simply because it is one's own. Patriotism, in its unthinking form, asks people to cheer not for justice, but for a flag, not for truth, but for tribe. It wraps itself in noble language, honor, pride, loyalty, but beneath the surface, it often hides fear, insecurity, and the need to belong. It convinces people to fight wars for reasons they don't understand, to hate strangers they've never met, to defend systems that may be corrupt simply because they wear the right colors. Schopenhauer saw how patriotism could be used as a weapon of manipulation, how it turns thinking individuals into obedient masses. And when patriotism becomes identity, when your self-worth is tied to the land you were born on by chance, it shuts down empathy. It teaches you to celebrate borders, to mistrust difference, to believe that your suffering matters more than someone else's simply because it wears your uniform. That is not virtue. That is vanity dressed as morality. This quote is not a rejection of belonging. It's a warning against worship. When love for country turns into unquestioning loyalty, it stops being love at all. It becomes blindness. And in that blindness, history repeats its bloodiest mistakes. Death is a warning. Death is a warning. Not a threat, not a punishment, but a message written into the very fabric of life. One we spend most of our days trying to ignore. Schopenhauer didn't see death as a tragedy so much as a teacher, a silent figure standing at the edge of every joy, every dream, every breath, reminding us that none of it lasts. And that knowledge, if we're brave enough to let it in, should change everything. Every laugh, every moment of connection, every sunrise. We take them all for granted, as if time were infinite, but death shatters that illusion. It reminds us that every second is borrowed. Every person we love is temporary. Every version of ourselves is already fading. Death is not lurking in the distance. It's moving toward us, patiently, invisibly, with every heartbeat. And yet, most people don't want to hear it. They push it down with distractions, with busyness, with denial. But Schopenhauer dares us to listen, to let death's presence sharpen our lives, Because when you stop pretending you have forever, you begin to choose differently. You speak the truth more quickly. You forgive. You pay attention. You stop postponing joy, and you stop wasting time on things that steal it. Death is a warning, not to be feared, but to be honored. It is the force that gives weight to our days, urgency to our choices, and sacredness to even the smallest moments. And if we live with that awareness, we don't become darker, we become more alive. Music is the world's melody. Music is the world's melody. In this poetic truth, Schopenhauer reveals something deeper than art. He reveals the soul of existence itself. Music is not entertainment. It is not background noise. It is the language beneath language, the pulse beneath silence, the invisible architecture of emotion that binds everything together. It doesn't describe the world. It is the world, translated into sound. Every rhythm, every note, every harmony mirrors the rise and fall of life, its longing, its joy, its ache. When Schopenhauer said music expresses the inner nature of the world, he wasn't being metaphorical. He meant it literally, because unlike other art forms, music bypasses representation. It doesn't depict reality. It is reality, vibrating at a frequency the soul instinctively understands. You don't need to speak a word of its language to feel its power. You hear a single chord, and suddenly you remember a moment you didn't even know you forgot. You feel tears rise before your mind catches up. Music is what pain sounds like when it dares to sing. It's what love sounds like when it can't be spoken. It's what silence fills itself with when it becomes too full to hold. And whether it comes from a symphony, a heartbeat, or the wind rustling through trees, it reminds us that we are not separate from the world. We are part of its song. Schopenhauer believed music was metaphysical truth, raw, unfiltered, eternal. Because before there were words, before there were rules, there was sound, and it's still playing, always. Opinion blocks truth more than ignorance. Opinion blocks truth more than ignorance. Schopenhauer didn't fear the empty mind. He feared the mind that thought it was full. Ignorance can be taught. It's blank, willing, even curious. But opinion, especially the kind that hardens into identity, is a wall. It doesn't seek to learn. It seeks to be right. It rejects anything that threatens its comfort. And in that stubborn defense, truth is not just missed, it's attacked. This is the silent tragedy of the human condition. We would rather protect our beliefs than confront the discomfort of being wrong. We cling to opinions like lifeboats in a storm, mistaking them for truth because they feel familiar, safe, ours. And the more deeply held they are, the more we confuse them with who we are. So when truth arrives, unexpected, inconvenient, undeniable, we don't welcome it. We defend against it. We rationalize, deny, mock, anything but admit the ground beneath us was never stable to begin with. Schopenhauer's insight cuts deep because we all do this. We reject before we reflect. We argue before we ask. And in doing so, we imprison ourselves in belief systems built not on reality, but on comfort. Truth, meanwhile, waits patiently, unmoved, unchanged, watching us fortify our illusions. Ignorance can grow into understanding, but opinion, when rooted in pride, becomes a fortress with no windows. It doesn't just block new knowledge, it keeps the soul in darkness. And unless we learn to loosen our grip, to question even what feels most certain, we risk mistaking our narrow view for the whole sky. Win fame, protect honor. Win fame, protect honor. In this razor-sharp contrast, Schopenhauer reveals two forces that shape a person's legacy, one that dazzles the world and one that guards the soul. Fame is something we chase. It's loud, it's public. It can be built with charm, talent, timing, or even deception. It craves attention, and when we pursue it, we often trade pieces of ourselves for the applause of strangers. But honor is different. Honor isn't something you get, it's something you keep, and once it's gone, it rarely returns. Fame can be given, honor must be earned. Fame is how the world sees you, Honor is how you see yourself when no one's watching. Schopenhauer warns us, chase fame if you must, but guard your honor, because the world will gladly steal it if you let it. You can be famous and hollow, celebrated and ashamed. You can stand in the spotlight while your conscience quietly crumbles. That's why fame feels fragile. It relies on others. But honor is rooted in something unshakable. Your choices, your integrity, the way you treat people who can do nothing for you, the promises you keep even when they're inconvenient, the boundaries you refuse to cross, even when no one would blame you if you did. Fame fades. It's built on perception, and perception is a house of smoke. But honor follows you into silence, into failure, even into death. So yes, win fame if it comes, but protect your honor like it's all you have, because one day it might be. More mind, more pain. More mind, more pain. In this brutally honest truth, Schopenhauer exposes the hidden cost of deep awareness. Intelligence is often seen as a blessing, sharp perception, refined understanding, expanded vision. But with that expansion comes exposure. The more you see, the more you feel. The more you understand, the harder it is to look away. Simplicity protects the mind. Complexity pierces it. A deeper mind notices the things others miss. The quiet suffering behind someone's smile, the slow erosion of time, the absurdity of human cruelty, the fragility built into every moment of joy. Where others skate along the surface, the thinking soul dives, and in the depths, it finds pain that cannot be unlearned. Awareness becomes a weight. You watch the world unravel itself, and while others sleep peacefully in delusion, you lie awake with truth. This pain isn't just external, it's internal too. The more conscious you are, the more you examine yourself, your doubts, contradictions, fears, failures. There's nowhere to hide. The mind turns inward, and in that reflection, it finds wounds that thinking alone cannot heal. But here's the paradox. The same mind that suffers more also feels more. It experiences awe, wonder, beauty, and connection at unimaginable depth. Yet that depth comes at a cost, a constant awareness of impermanence, of injustice, of how much there is to lose. Schopenhauer doesn't say this to romanticize suffering. He says it to illuminate a truth few will admit. Wisdom often hurts, and to carry a brilliant mind is, in part, to carry a burden, one that can't be put down, but perhaps, over time, can be turned into meaning. Life costs more than it gives. Life costs more than it gives. Schopenhauer does not flinch here. He forces us to face a truth most spend their whole lives trying to avoid. We are taught to chase happiness, to expect fulfillment, to believe that life is a gift wrapped in moments of joy and meaning. But behind the laughter, beneath the milestones, there's an unspoken toll. Every breath we take demands a payment through pain, loss, fear, and the relentless erosion of time. From the moment we are born, we begin to lose. We lose innocence, loved ones, dreams, youth. Every gain we achieve is rented, not owned. The body ages, the mind cracks, the heart breaks more than it heals, and yet we are told to smile through it, to be grateful for the gift of existence. But Schopenhauer asks, what if the gift is mostly struggle, with brief flickers of light just bright enough to keep us hoping? This isn't despair for the sake of drama, it's an unveiling. It's the quiet realization that suffering isn't the exception in life, it's the rule. We mask it with distractions, numb it with noise, dress it up in purpose, but it's there, always waiting beneath the surface. And yet, there's something oddly beautiful about this truth, because when you stop expecting life to reward you, you stop being crushed when it doesn't. You begin to find depth in endurance, grace in resilience, power in simply continuing. You stop chasing meaning and start making it, in the ashes, in the ruins, in the cost itself. Pessimists know the facts. Pessimists know the facts, not because they're cynical or bitter or broken, but because they've looked life in the eye without blinking. Schopenhauer understood that the pessimist is not the one who has given up on life, it's the one who has seen it clearly. While others sugarcoat suffering with optimism and hope, the pessimist sees what most deny, that pain is not the exception in this world, it is the rule. That disappointment isn't rare, it's inevitable. That joy is real but fragile and always passing. To be pessimistic is not to be joyless, it's to be honest. The pessimist walks through life without illusions. They expect the storm. They know that people lie, that love fades, that death is closer than we pretend. And because of that, their gratitude is earned. Their laughter is real. They don't take beauty for granted because they know how rare it is. They don't waste time with fantasies because they know how quickly time disappears. Optimism often floats on denial. It says, everything will be fine, but pessimism leans in and whispers, it probably won't, and that's exactly why this moment matters. Schopenhauer doesn't celebrate despair, he respects it, because facing the truth of suffering, of impermanence, of struggle is not weakness, it's strength, and those who dare to see the world without flinching may seem heavy, dark, cold, but beneath that darkness is wisdom, and behind the quiet eyes of the pessimist is someone who has seen the whole picture and still somehow keeps walking. Wonder starts philosophy. Wonder starts philosophy. In this quiet but explosive truth, Schopenhauer reminds us that all deep thought, all inquiry, all striving for understanding begins not with certainty, but with awe, with that sudden, disorienting pause when life no longer feels ordinary. It's the child staring into the night sky, overwhelmed by stars they cannot count. The moment you sit in silence and ask yourself, why am I here? What is all this? That is not confusion, it is awakening. It is the spark of philosophy. Philosophy doesn't begin with answers. It begins with the sacred discomfort of not knowing, of feeling that everything around you, time, death, love, pain, is stranger than you ever dared to admit. Wonder is what cracks the surface of routine and lets the light pour in. It's the refusal to take anything for granted, to look at the simplest things, a tree, a breath, a goodbye, and feel the urge to ask what they mean. Schopenhauer knew that wonder was not childish, it was sacred rebellion, because once you allow yourself to wonder, you refuse to live on autopilot. You begin to question the stories you've been told, the roles you've accepted, the truths handed to you without thought. You peel back the illusion of normal, and that peeling never stops. This is why philosophy is born from wonder, not intellect, because it isn't about proving, it's about feeling that the world is too vast, too fragile, too mysterious to simply be. And once wonder takes hold of you, you're never truly at rest again, only deeper and deeper in search. We flee inward reflection. We flee inward reflection, not because we're weak, but because we're terrified of what we might find if we stop long enough to listen. In a world addicted to noise, distraction becomes salvation. We scroll, we binge, we work, we chase, anything to avoid sitting still in the echo chamber of our own mind. Schopenhauer knew that the greatest truths about ourselves don't shout, they whisper in silence, and that silence is what we fear most. Looking inward means confronting what we've buried. The guilt we pretend doesn't sting anymore, the dreams we quietly gave up on, the resentment we've tried to dress as strength. It means facing the parts of ourselves that we've outgrown, betrayed, or simply forgotten. To reflect is to remember. To remember is to feel, and feeling hurts. But it's not just pain that hides inside, it's truth. Reflection is the only path to genuine transformation. But most people don't want truth, they want comfort, and comfort dies in the stillness of honest thought. That's why we run. That's why we fill every second with stimulation, with input, with noise, because in the mirror of self-awareness, illusions melt, and we are left naked. Schopenhauer's words don't scold, they reveal. If you've ever felt uneasy in silence, If you've ever panicked when left alone with your thoughts, you're not alone. It's the soul's resistance to being truly seen. But the question is, how long can you run from the one person you can never escape? Yourself. Simplicity masks mystery. Simplicity masks mystery. Schopenhauer, with this quiet stroke of genius, exposes how the things that seem easiest to grasp are often the most profoundly misunderstood. We see simplicity and assume we understand. A flame flickers. It's just fire. A heartbeat thumps. It's just life. A child smiles. It's just joy. But beneath these moments of apparent clarity lies something bottomless, something that resists explanation, even as we pretend to name it. The most powerful truths in the world are the ones that hide in plain sight. Love, time, death, consciousness. We speak of them with ease, use them daily in conversation, wrap them in tidy phrases, yet not a single one is fully understood. The more we study, the deeper the shadows become. The more we name things, the more they slip through our definitions. Simplicity gives us comfort, but it also blinds us. We think a leaf is just a leaf until we peer into its cells and see an entire universe of life, light, and decay. We say, it's just water, but it carves canyons and sustains worlds. And what could be simpler than silence? Yet silence can carry grief, ecstasy, awe, an entire conversation that has no words. Schopenhauer's warning is clear. Don't be fooled by the surface. The moment something feels obvious is often the moment you've stopped really looking. True mystery doesn't always come wrapped in complexity. It hides in what you think you already know. And if you can sit with simplicity long enough, it will begin to unfold into something vast, strange, and quietly infinite. Time consumes all. Time consumes all. Not with malice, not with mercy, just with quiet, unstoppable certainty. Schopenhauer's words aren't poetic. They're a sentence written into the fabric of existence. Time is not the background of our lives. It is the silent predator. It does not pause, does not ask, does not care. It swallows mountains, empires, names, faces, dreams. It devours the mightiest and the meek alike. No love is strong enough to outlast it. No beauty immune, no joy untouched. Everything you cherish, this moment, this breath, the warmth in someone's voice, will be taken. Maybe slowly, maybe suddenly, but taken. Time erodes memories until even the sharpest ones dull into fragments. It turns youth into nostalgia, passion into stories, and certainty into myth. It is always moving, always ending what we've only just begun to understand. And yet, this truth is not meant to crush. It is meant to wake, because if time consumes all, then every second you're given is sacred. Every glance, every laugh, every night sky is borrowed, and knowing it won't last is what makes it matter. What breaks your heart also sets it on fire. You do not get forever, but you get now, and that is everything. Schopenhauer doesn't romanticize decay, he honors it, because in the face of time's hunger, your choice is clear. You can numb yourself, pretend you have endless tomorrows, or you can feel this fleeting life like a flame on your skin and love harder, speak braver, live fuller, knowing every beautiful thing is already slipping away. Solitude enables selfhood. Solitude enables selfhood. Schopenhauer's words echo with both warning and invitation, because in a world that worships noise, applause, and constant connection, solitude feels like exile. But it isn't. It's where the real self begins to breathe, when we are alone, truly alone, without distraction, without performance, without mirrors to reflect who we're supposed to be. We finally hear the voice that's ours and ours alone. Selfhood doesn't emerge in crowds. It doesn't take shape through praise or approval. It is carved in silence. It grows in the stillness where masks fall and roles fade. Most people never meet themselves. They meet versions, assembled from expectation, fear, family, and culture. But solitude strips all of that away, and what's left is uncomfortable, raw, often painful, but it's real, it's you. Schopenhauer saw solitude not as loneliness, but as sacred ground, a place where the soul stops performing and starts reflecting, where you can ask the terrifying questions: what do I want? What do I believe? Who am I? When no one is watching. And in those questions, selfhood is born, not the self you were told to become, but the self that has always been waiting underneath. Yet, most people flee solitude. They fear what it might reveal. They drown it in noise, people, screens. Because facing yourself means dismantling illusions, letting go of borrowed dreams, and carrying the weight of your own truth without escape. But if you dare to sit in that silence, if you dare to stay, you'll find the one thing the world can't give you, a self that is yours, whole, unshaken, and free. Passions rule us. Passions rule us. Schopenhauer doesn't ask politely here. He declares it like a verdict already lived. We like to believe we're rational beings, driven by logic, guided by thought. But deep down, we know it isn't true. What truly moves us, what drives our choices, our fears, our obsessions, is not reason, but desire. Not the careful voice in our head, but the fire in our chests. We don't fall in love because it makes sense. We don't chase dreams because they're practical. We don't spiral into rage, lust, jealousy, or joy because we thought our way into them. These forces erupt from within us, raw and untamed, dragging logic behind them like a broken wheel. Passion makes us leap before looking, speak before thinking, burn bridges we later wish we could cross again. It pulls us toward people we should walk away from. It convinces us that the impossible is necessary and that the fleeting is eternal. Schopenhauer knew that passion wasn't a weakness. It was a prison, because when desire rules, we are no longer free. We serve it. We make sacrifices to it. We rewrite reality to protect it, and in its grip, we often destroy the very things we claim to love. We don't control our passions. They control us, and the illusion that we're steering the ship only lasts until everything crashes. This truth hurts because it's real. The heart doesn't ask permission, it demands, and unless we learn to recognize its reign, we live not as masters of our lives, but as subjects to the storm inside us. Belief often predates truth. Belief often predates truth. In this unsettling insight, Schopenhauer unveils the hidden mechanics of the human mind. We believe first and justify later. Our convictions often arrive before evidence, before logic, before experience. We don't wait to discover what is real. We decide what we want to be real, and then twist the world to fit that shape. Belief is born in emotion, in fear, in need. It's born in the desperate craving for certainty in a world that offers none. We believe because we need to. We need to think we're right, that we're safe, that we're seen. So we adopt ideas that give us comfort, identity, power, even if they're false. And then we build fortresses of arguments to protect them. We call it reason, but it's often just defense. The truth may knock on the door quietly and patiently, but if it threatens what we already believe, we pretend not to hear it. Schopenhauer isn't condemning belief itself. He's warning us about the sequence, because once belief takes root first, truth becomes an intruder. We stop seeking and start defending. We reject the uncomfortable, deny the uncertain, and cling to the illusion that we already know enough. And this is where wars are born, where ignorance spreads, where growth stops. Because truth doesn't shout, it waits. And if we're too busy clinging to belief, we'll never feel its gentle tap on the shoulder. This quote is not about faith versus reason. It's about timing. And in the race between what we want to be true and what is true, belief almost always gets there first. The masses seek happiness outside. The masses seek happiness outside. They run toward things: money, praise, romance, luxury, hoping each will finally silence the ache inside. Schopenhauer knew this search well. He saw how people spend entire lifetimes chasing what they think will complete them, mistaking pleasure for peace, mistaking distraction for fulfillment. It's not because they're weak, it's because they're afraid to look inward, afraid to face the emptiness they carry, the questions they've buried, the loneliness that surfaces when the noise fades. We're taught from the beginning that happiness is out there, in the car, the house, the title, in the perfect body, the perfect partner, the perfect moment. But no matter how much we collect, consume, or achieve, something always feels missing. That haunting dissatisfaction, the one we try to outrun, is not failure. It's truth. It's the soul saying, "This isn't it. Keep looking." And yet the masses don't. They chase harder. They numb deeper. They confuse motion for meaning. True happiness, quiet, grounded, lasting, cannot be bought, impressed into others, or borrowed from a lover's arms. It is built inside. And that kind of happiness terrifies people because it requires solitude, honesty, shadow work. It requires sitting in the silence with nothing to prove and asking, "Who am I without the world's applause?" Schopenhauer doesn't mock the masses. He mourns them, because the outside world will never be enough for someone at war within. And until we stop chasing light and start becoming it, happiness will always feel just out of reach, no matter how much we hold. Old age ends the masquerade. Old age ends the masquerade. In this stark reflection, Schopenhauer doesn't romanticize aging. He exposes it for what it truly is, a stripping away. Youth is a performance. It's a stage where masks are worn, confidence, beauty, ambition, charm. We play roles to impress, to seduce, to belong. We bend ourselves into personas, hoping they'll protect us from rejection, from failure, from truth. And for a while, it works. The world applauds the costume. But time is relentless. It peels back the performance, piece by piece. Looks fade, status slips. The roles you played so well begin to crumble under the weight of gravity, illness, silence. And one day, without warning, the world stops looking. The audience thins, the mirrors lose their magic, and you're left alone with what's underneath the mask. This is why old age is feared. It doesn't just bring decline, it brings exposure. It shows you who you've really been, beneath the vanity and striving. Some discover peace in that, others discover regret. Because when the masquerade ends, the truth is all that's left. Your choices, your kindness, your cruelty, your real self, no longer hidden behind youth's illusion. But in that exposure, there is also clarity, freedom. You no longer need to impress. You no longer need to pretend. The masquerade is over, and for the first time perhaps, you are seen, not for what you've projected, but for what you truly are. Whether that brings pride or pain depends on the life you lived behind the mask. Go alone, start now. Go alone, start now. In these 5 words, Schopenhauer lights a fire under the soul and strips away every excuse you've ever told yourself. We wait for permission, for support, for the right time, the right people, the right feeling, but those never come, not in the way we imagine. Life doesn't pause for your doubts. The path won't build itself, and if you don't start alone, you may never start at all. There's a brutal clarity here. Most journeys worth taking will begin in silence, in isolation, in uncertainty. No applause, no map, no one cheering you on. Just you and the aching truth that something inside must move, even if no one else sees it yet. Schopenhauer understood that greatness doesn't wait for company. The mind that creates, the heart that dares, the spirit that breaks from the herd, these don't bloom in the comfort of consensus. They walk forward without knowing if anyone will ever follow. It hurts, yes, to take a step when others stay still, to break away from the familiar and risk being misunderstood, ridiculed, or left behind. But the cost of waiting is even greater. Every moment you delay, you abandon the version of you that could have been. And the longer you wait for someone to join you, the further you drift from your own voice. So go, even if you're scared, even if you're uncertain, especially if you're alone, because that's how everything real begins, not with company, but with courage, not with answers, but with movement, not later, now. Nature is honest. Nature is honest. Schopenhauer offers this truth like a cold wind, bracing, pure, and impossible to ignore. In a world built on pretense, masks, and manipulation, nature stands as a force that never lies. It doesn't flatter you. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't care if you approve or understand. Nature simply is, unapologetically real, breathtakingly brutal, and completely indifferent to human vanity. A tree does not pretend to be a rock. A predator does not disguise its hunger as virtue. The seasons change without asking for your permission. There is no deceit in thunder, no exaggeration in fire, no hidden motive in the rising sun. Nature expresses truth through action, not intention, through consequence, not excuse. And that honesty is both beautiful and terrifying. Schopenhauer recognized that the human world is often the opposite, a stage of roles and illusions. We say one thing and mean another. We disguise desire as duty, fear as strength, and cruelty as justice. We wear smiles to mask sorrow, and we tell stories to protect ourselves from the raw truth. But nature doesn't participate in that performance. It reminds us, sometimes gently, often violently, that reality cannot be rewritten by wishful thinking. To say that nature is honest is to say that it reveals what we try to hide. It reflects back the truth of what we are, what we're made of, and what we must face. There's no mercy in it, but no hypocrisy either. And in that brutal clarity, there's a kind of redemption, a return to something real, something wild, something unashamed of being exactly what it is. Heart drives action. Heart drives action. Not logic, not reason, not truly. Schopenhauer understood this in a way that most thinkers deny. We tell ourselves that we act from the mind, that decisions come from careful calculation, but the truth is far more raw, far more vulnerable. It is the heart that moves us. Every life-changing decision, every irreversible mistake, every act of courage, cruelty, or compassion originates not from what we think, but from what we feel. You chase love not because it makes sense, but because it burns. You leave jobs, cities, marriages, not when the pros and cons are tallied, but when the ache becomes unbearable. You fight for something not because it's reasonable, but because your soul won't let you stand still. And even when you try to be rational, to be calm and detached, your heart whispers underneath it all, pulling the strings, pushing you forward, or holding you back. This is what makes humans so extraordinary and so tragic. We're creatures of passion pretending to be logical, and yet it's the heart that gives our actions meaning. It's what makes us brave, makes us foolish, makes us alive. The most rational choice in the world feels hollow without emotional gravity, and the most reckless leap can feel like truth when it's lit by love. Schopenhauer wasn't glorifying chaos. He was telling us to stop lying to ourselves. If you want to understand why someone did something, why you did something, don't just analyze the outcome. Ask what hurt. Ask what burned. Because behind every action that changed your life, there was a feeling you could no longer ignore. Thorns come without roses. Thorns come without roses. In this dark and sobering line, Schopenhauer lays bare one of life's cruelties, that pain is not always tied to beauty, that suffering doesn't always carry meaning, and that hardship can arrive without any higher purpose or reward. We've been told a lie since childhood, that every struggle strengthens us, that every scar leads to something better. But the truth is more brutal. Sometimes life wounds without healing. Sometimes the thorn pierces, and there is no rose to make it worth it. There are moments in life when you suffer not because you're growing, but simply because the world is indifferent, a betrayal that leaves no lesson, a loss that offers no transformation, a failure that leads to no breakthrough. It's in these moments that the soul aches, not just from pain, but from the unbearable emptiness around it. No silver lining, no poetic meaning, just a thorn and silence. Schopenhauer doesn't say this to steal hope. He says it to kill illusion. Because when you accept that thorns can come on their own, you stop romanticizing pain. You stop pretending that every struggle is sacred. And in that honesty, you begin to live with your eyes wide open. You stop waiting for the rose. You learn to bleed without needing a reason. This is not despair, it's liberation. It frees you from false promises and teaches you to seek beauty while you can, love while it's here, and hold joy fiercely, not because it always follows pain, but because it often stands alone, just like the thorns. Pretend to believe liars. Pretend to believe liars. In this chillingly sharp observation, Schopenhauer peels back the social mask we all wear and reveals a painful truth about human interaction. We often recognize deception and silently let it pass, not because we're fooled, but because we choose not to confront it. Why? Because exposing a lie risks more than silence. It risks conflict, embarrassment, isolation. So instead, we nod, we smile, we pretend to believe the colleague flattering us for gain, the friend rewriting history to look innocent, the authority spinning half-truths as virtue. We see the lie, but we weigh the cost of truth, and more often than not, we let it slide. It's not ignorance, it's self-preservation, because sometimes calling out a lie doesn't just shatter someone else's illusion, it shatters everything holding a fragile piece together. Schopenhauer wasn't just pointing to passive social etiquette, he was uncovering the silent contracts we sign every day. I'll let you lie if you let me avoid the consequences of challenging it. It's an agreement built not on honesty, but fear, and the more it happens, the more truth becomes a ghost in the room, present but never spoken. This quote doesn't glorify deception, it mourns how deeply it's woven into the fabric of polite society. To pretend to believe a liar isn't just to protect them, it's to betray yourself, quietly, one nod at a time. And while everyone plays along, no one wins. They just grow further from the courage to speak what they already know. Life disturbs peaceful nothingness. Life disturbs peaceful nothingness. In this haunting reflection, Schopenhauer flips our assumptions upside down, because we are taught to fear death, to mourn nothingness, to see life as the gift and non-existence as the tragedy. But what if it's the other way around? What if, before we were born, we were at peace, not lacking, not hurting, simply not? And then came life, a rupture in that stillness, a violent emergence into craving, fear, pain, desire, a storm of sensation that never lets us rest. To live is to be disturbed, to want, to lose, to ache. From our very first breath, we are pulled into a world of need. Hunger gnaws, time races, people leave, and the mind, always restless, never stops asking why. Schopenhauer's quote doesn't dismiss the beauty of life, but it refuses to romanticize it. He reminds us that behind every joy is the shadow of impermanence, behind every love, the fear of loss. Life is precious precisely because it is so fragile, so fleeting, so intrusive, and yet we cling to it, we defend it, we dread the return to nothingness, as if the suffering we endure is preferable to the silence we came from. But Schopenhauer forces us to ask, was that silence not peaceful? Was non-existence not free of longing, of burden, of self? This quote doesn't demand despair, it offers perspective. It reminds us that life is a break in stillness, not its opposite. And in knowing that, we might stop taking our time here for granted, or fearing the peace that waits for us when it ends. Parting is mini-death. Parting is mini-death. Schopenhauer wasn't being poetic. He was being painfully exact. Every goodbye, whether whispered or torn, carries a fracture that mirrors the final separation we all dread. It's not just distance. It's the violent awareness that something once alive between two souls is ending, a rhythm disrupted, a presence withdrawn, a voice that used to say your name now silent in your days. And though they may still breathe, something between you has died, and that death is real. We don't mourn just people. We mourn moments. We mourn phases of life. We mourn versions of ourselves that only existed in that specific connection, whether it's a breakup, a farewell at an airport, or the slow drifting apart of once inseparable hearts. Each parting pulls at the same thread, the one that ties us to permanence, to safety, to belonging. And when that thread snaps, we feel it in our chest, in our stomach, in the quiet after the door closes. That's why goodbyes feel so disproportionate, why even brief separations sting longer than expected. Because we're not just saying, see you later. We're confronting the fact that nothing lasts, that even joy has an expiration date, that love, in all its brilliance, cannot protect us from time. Schopenhauer forces us to see that every parting is a rehearsal for the final one, and though that truth is unbearable, it also makes connection holy. It makes every embrace, every laugh, every shared silence into something fleeting and sacred, because we never truly know which goodbye will be the last. And maybe that's what makes us hold on so tightly until we have to let go. Enjoy the now. Enjoy the now. 3 words, so simple, they sound like a cliche. But Schopenhauer didn't speak in cliches. He spoke in truths so sharp they leave marks. This is not some careless call to indulge or ignore the future. It is a desperate whisper from a philosopher who understood how much time we lose chasing ghosts and phantoms, regret, ambition, fear, control. We miss the present because we are trapped in stories that no longer exist or haven't yet come true. The past is over. You can't fix it, rewind it, or relive it, though your mind will try. The future is a hallucination, always moving just out of reach, never quite arriving as you planned. And yet, that's where most people live, in a place that does not exist. Meanwhile, life, the actual living of life, is happening now. In the breath you're taking, in the sound of someone's voice, in the quiet beauty of being awake in this very second. Schopenhauer, with all his pessimism, knew this. The present moment is the only reality untouched by suffering if we allow ourselves to truly feel it. Because pain often lives in memory or anticipation, not in this heartbeat, this glance, this warmth. But to enjoy the now requires courage. It means stopping the endless striving, the comparison, the waiting for permission to be happy. It means letting go, not of responsibility, but of illusion. You will never arrive at joy. You must find it here or not at all, because this moment, it's already fading, and it will never come again. Expect less, suffer less. Expect less, suffer less. Schopenhauer doesn't offer comfort here. He offers liberation through disillusionment, because beneath nearly every heartbreak, frustration, or disappointment lies one thing: expectation. We imagine how things should be. We built stories about how others would behave, how success would feel, how love would last. And when reality refused to match the picture in our heads, we didn't just feel pain, we felt betrayal by life itself. But life never made those promises. People are not scripted. Outcomes are not owed. The universe doesn't bend to our hopes, no matter how pure or desperate they may be. And this is what Schopenhauer forces us to confront. The more tightly we grip expectations, the more fragile we become. We hand over our peace to illusions, and then call it suffering when those illusions crack. This doesn't mean we stop hoping. It means we stop depending. It means we learn to love without needing to be loved the same way in return, to try without demanding victory, to give without measuring what comes back, not because we're passive, but because we're awake, because freedom begins where expectation ends. Expect less, not as a way to lower your life, but to lighten it, to release the chains of imagined guarantees and make space for what is. When you stop expecting the world to fulfill a fantasy, you begin to see its quiet, imperfect beauty, and you suffer less, not because life changes, but because your grip on it finally does. Human intellect is small. Human intellect is small. Schopenhauer speaks this not as an insult, but as a devastating truth, one that humbles us if we dare to look it in the eye. We build monuments, craft theories, conquer mountains, and decode the stars, and yet, in the grand scale of existence, our understanding is a flickering candle in an endless storm. We mistake our cleverness for comprehension, but the deeper we think, the more we realize how much lies beyond our grasp. We can't explain why we exist. We don't know what comes before birth or after death. We name the galaxies, but can't quiet our own thoughts. We develop language only to misuse it. We invent gods and tear them down. Even our greatest ideas tremble under time's weight. What we call wisdom today, generations may laugh at tomorrow. That's not failure. It's the limit of a mind shaped by survival, not by truth. Schopenhauer wasn't trying to shame us. He wanted us to see, to understand that for all our brilliance, we are still ruled by impulse, by emotion, by fear, that beneath every system we build lies uncertainty, that every truth we cherish is likely wrapped in illusion. And yet, there's something beautiful in that smallness, because once we admit the limits of intellect, we make room for wonder, for humility, for awe. We stop pretending we own the universe and instead start listening to it. The mind is small, but in knowing that, the soul begins to grow. Inner joy is best. Inner joy is best, not because it's louder, flashier, or more thrilling, but because it's yours, untouchable, unborrowed. Schopenhauer knew that the joy that comes from within is the only kind that can survive when the world falls silent. Outer joy is fragile. It depends on things, people, circumstances. It flares up with praise and vanishes with criticism. It lives on attention, applause, approval, and when those things fade, as they always do, it crumbles. But inner joy? That's different. It doesn't scream, it hums. It doesn't dazzle, it steadies. It's the quiet feeling of being okay even when everything around you is broken. It's waking up and feeling whole for no reason. It's laughing alone. It's peace that doesn't demand proof. The world trains us to chase joy like it's a prize to be earned. Buy this, become that, impress them, then you'll feel it. And for a moment you do, but it fades always. And the emptiness that returns is sharper than before, because now you know even getting what you wanted wasn't enough. Schopenhauer's wisdom is a warning and a hope. He tells you, if your joy depends on the world owns you. But if your joy lives inside, nothing can take it. Not loss, not rejection, not time. You stop chasing, you start being, and in that stillness you realize the best kind of joy doesn't need to be seen, it just needs to be felt by the one who carries it, quiet, steady, free. Truth is most beautiful bare. Truth is most beautiful bare. In this piercing insight, Schopenhauer strips truth of all its disguises, its metaphors, its masks, its ornaments, and reveals what so few are willing to see. That truth, in its rawest form, is stunning, not because it comforts, but because it cuts. Because when laid bare, truth is pure, undeniable, unflinching. It doesn't beg to be believed. It doesn't care if it's welcome. It simply is. We live in a world obsessed with coding reality in layers, softening words, spinning stories, selling illusions. We dress truth in language meant to please rather than provoke. But Schopenhauer tells us, stop hiding it. Stop dressing it up to be more palatable, more poetic. Because real truth, the kind that shakes you, wakes you, transforms you, needs no costume. It is most powerful when it stands naked before you, vulnerable and unafraid. To face bare truth is to face yourself. It's looking in the mirror without filters, without excuses, and seeing who you really are. It's admitting you were wrong, that you're lost, that you're afraid, that you want something you can't name, and somehow, in that honesty, there is beauty because it is real. And realness, no matter how painful, is sacred. Truth doesn't need to be made beautiful. It is beautiful because it frees, because it clarifies, because it tears down the false and makes space for something honest to live. So, if you're brave enough, remove the layers, speak it plain, and let truth stand bare in the light, aching, naked, undeniable. Music captures essence. Music captures essence. In this profoundly tender truth, Schopenhauer gives music a place above language, above logic, even above philosophy. Words can explain, describe, argue, but music feels. It bypasses the intellect and speaks directly to the soul, without translation, without defense. A single note can pierce the heart more deeply than 1,000 sentences. A melody can say what grief cannot voice, what love cannot explain, what joy cannot contain. Music is not about sound, it's about being. It reflects the inner motion of existence itself, our longings, our struggles, our ecstasies, our despair. It vibrates in harmony with our inner lives, echoing feelings we didn't know we were carrying. It doesn't just accompany emotion, it awakens it. That's why a song can make you cry without knowing why a chord progression can feel like coming home, why silence after music feels like loss. Schopenhauer saw music as the purest art because it didn't imitate reality. It was reality in another form. It didn't need to represent the world because it mirrored the will, the living force inside every human being. Where painting shows an object and poetry describes a thought, music embodies the very movement of the soul. And in a world where everything demands explanation, music demands nothing. It asks only that you listen, that you feel, that you surrender for a moment the need to understand, and instead allow yourself to be understood. Because in its sound, music carries the essence of what it means to be human, wordless, timeless, and infinitely real. Philosophers defend absurdities. Philosophers defend absurdities. Schopenhauer doesn't say this to mock philosophy, but to expose its shadow side, the one cloaked in prestige and illusion. The thinker who should be seeking truth often becomes its most eloquent betrayer. Why? Because once a philosopher has declared an idea, no matter how irrational, abstract, or detached from lived reality, their pride becomes its guardian. They don't question it, they polish it. They don't listen, they argue. And slowly, what began as inquiry decays into performance. The tragedy is that philosophy was born from wonder, from doubt, from the aching need to understand existence. But somewhere along the way, it grew ornate. It became wrapped in layers of jargon, complexity, and systems built more to appear profound than to be true. Philosophers started defending ideas that no longer made sense, ideas that defied experience, denied instinct, rejected what people feel in their bones, just to protect the image of genius. And this is the absurdity. A mind so desperate to be original, it loses sight of what's real. The more brilliant the thinker, the more elegantly they can argue for the illogical. They turn nonsense into philosophy through structure, rhetoric, and reputation. But Schopenhauer saw it clearly. Brilliance, without grounding, becomes delusion wearing a crown. This quote isn't cynical, it's a challenge. It dares every thinker to ask, am I speaking to illuminate or just to impress? Am I chasing truth or protecting ego? Because even the most refined theory is meaningless if it drifts too far from the world that bleeds, breathes, and breaks. Change is harder than pain. Change is harder than pain. That's the quiet, brutal truth Schopenhauer dares to say out loud. Most people won't admit it, not even to themselves, but they would rather suffer in the familiar than step into the unknown. Pain, for all its cruelty, becomes a kind of home. You learn how to carry it, how to explain it, how to live around it. And because of that, many endure far longer than they should. Bad relationships, toxic habits, empty routines, because changing means risking, and risking is terrifying. Change demands that you let go of the known, that you kill parts of yourself, that you shed identities you clung to for safety. It means leaving behind what once defined you, even if it hurts. And that kind of death, the death of the old self, is more frightening than the suffering we've grown numb to. So we stay, we rationalize, we wait, and we call it strength when sometimes it's just fear. Pain whispers, "You know me." Change screams, "You don't know what comes next." And the soul hesitates. Schopenhauer wasn't glorifying suffering. He was revealing why people trap themselves in it, because change, even when necessary, requires a kind of violence, the tearing away of comfort, the collapse of control. It's not just uncomfortable, it's grieving who you were. And yet, it's the only path to something new. The truth is, many will endure a lifetime of slow dying before they take a single step toward rebirth, not because they're weak, but because they're human, and because sometimes the known pain feels safer than the unknown freedom. Fame is a sweet lie. Fame is a sweet lie. It tastes like admiration and sounds like applause, but beneath its glittering surface lies something hollow, something cruel. Schopenhauer saw it for what it truly is, not a reward, but a mirage. Fame tells you that you matter because they say so. It feeds the ego with borrowed validation, convincing you that the more eyes watching, the more you exist. And for a while, it works. The spotlight warms you. The attention feels like love. But it isn't love. It's projection. It's strangers falling in love with a version of you that's carefully sculpted, edited, performed. They adore the image, not the person, and deep down, the person knows it. That's the torment of fame. The higher you rise in their eyes, the more invisible your real self becomes. You smile more, you say the right things, you chase relevance like it's oxygen, but inside, you begin to disappear. Fame lies because it tells you it will fill the emptiness. It says, if enough people see you, you'll finally see yourself. But instead, it blinds you to the truth that worth was never out there, that love doesn't come in likes, that real connection can't be scaled. And when the crowd moves on, as it always does, what's left? A voice in the dark, wondering if you ever truly mattered at all. Schopenhauer doesn't envy the famous. He pities them, because once you taste the sweet lie, the silence afterward is unbearable. And in chasing everyone's love, you risk losing the only love that's real, your own. Sleep pays death's interest. Sleep pays death's interest. With this darkly poetic metaphor, Schopenhauer threads mortality into the fabric of our daily lives, not as an abstract fear, but as something we touch every night. Sleep, he says, is not just rest. It is a quiet installment, a subtle down payment toward the final silence that awaits us all. Each night we surrender consciousness, drift into the unknown, and dissolve, if only briefly, into something that eerily resembles non-existence. We treat sleep as routine, but it is profound. In it, we lose our ego, our plans, our control. We slip into a state where time bends, identity fades, and the world vanishes. And yet, we welcome it. We need it, because the mind, like the body, cannot bear continuous wakefulness. It would collapse. So nature, in its strange mercy, gives us this rehearsal for death, not to frighten us, but to remind us you are not as permanent as you think. Schopenhauer's words strike with a quiet dread, but also with understanding. They suggest that death does not come all at once. It approaches in small nightly offerings. Every time you close your eyes, you taste surrender. Every time you drift off, you loosen your grip on this life. And in doing so, you learn, subconsciously, how to let go. This isn't meant to depress. It's meant to wake you. If sleep is a sample of death, then life, conscious, messy, burning life, is your chance to feel, to try, to be, before the debt comes due and the final interest is paid. Now is all we have. Now is all we have. Schopenhauer's words strike like lightning through the fog of memory and anticipation. We live, like we own the future, like there's always more time, another chance, a later moment where we'll finally begin. We replay the past, we obsess over what's next, and in the process, we sleepwalk through the only thing that's real, the present. This moment, this breath, this heartbeat, it is the only thing that actually exists. Everything else is ghost or dream. We postpone joy, healing, courage. We wait for the perfect timing to love someone, to say what matters, to take the leap we ache for in silence. But perfection is a lie. Timing is a myth. The only place where life happens is here, now, in this trembling instant that vanishes even as we try to hold it. Schopenhauer knew the cruelty of time. He saw how the mind clings to what's gone and fears what hasn't come, while missing the miracle unfolding right now, the taste of air, the flicker of light, the fragile fact that you are alive. Now is fleeting. It doesn't promise safety. It doesn't erase pain, but it is yours. And if you don't learn to live in it, you risk dying inside moments you never truly inhabited. This quote is not just a reminder, it's a reckoning, because in the end, you won't regret the risks you took or the things you said. You'll regret the moments you were too distracted to live, and by the time you realize it, now will be gone. Stay strong, stay strong. It's said often, too often, until it sounds like a platitude, a hollow phrase meant to patch the bleeding without touching the wound. But Schopenhauer's version isn't soft. It's not about pretending you're okay. It's about enduring with your eyes open, about seeing life as it is, unfair, painful, fleeting, and choosing to keep standing anyway. Staying strong doesn't mean being invincible. It means surviving what should have broken you. It means carrying on when the world gives you no reason to. Strength in this light is not loud. It's not about lifting more or smiling wider. It's quiet, private. It's the hand you force yourself to raise from the bed, the breath you take in the middle of grief, the way you still show up for people, even when you feel empty. It's the moment you cry alone in the dark, but still wake up the next morning, still live, still try. Schopenhauer saw strength not in those who avoided pain, but in those who carried it with dignity, who looked into the abyss and didn't flinch, because life will test you. It will take things you thought you couldn't live without. It will shake your identity, your faith, your sense of meaning. But staying strong means refusing to collapse into despair, even when despair would be easier. So when you hear stay strong, don't hear hide your feelings. Hear, don't give up. Don't let the pain steal the parts of you that matter. Feel it, carry it, but don't surrender. Strength is the quiet promise. I'm still here, even when everything says you shouldn't be. Opinion rules, not reason. Opinion rules, not reason. With these 5 words, Schopenhauer delivers a devastating truth about human nature and society, a truth we feel every time logic is drowned out by volume, every time evidence is ignored in favor of belief. We want to believe that truth wins, that reason guides the collective mind, that facts prevail over noise, but they don't, not often, because people are not led by clarity, they are led by comfort, and opinions, especially loud, simple, emotional ones, offer exactly that. Reason is quiet. It requires effort. It asks you to examine, question, and sometimes change. But opinion? Opinion demands nothing. It flatters the ego, confirms bias, and wraps complexity in certainty. That's why it spreads faster. That's why it wins elections, fuels wars, breaks families, and shapes culture, because it speaks the language of emotion, identity, tribe. We see it everywhere. Truth buried beneath trends, experts silenced by influencers, calm thinkers ignored, while the loudest voices fill the room. It's not because reason isn't real. It's because most people don't want it. They want validation. They want their worldview handed back to them, not challenged. Schopenhauer wasn't cynical. He was honest. He saw that history isn't written by the rationale. It's shaped by belief, fear, repetition. And unless people choose to rise above instinct, to crave truth more than comfort, opinion will always rule. So if you care about reason, guard it, fight for it, speak it even when no one listens, because it may not rule the world, but it just might save your soul. Honor is self-respect. Honor is self-respect. Schopenhauer's words cut through the noise of medals, praise, and reputation and point us back to something far more intimate, the relationship we have with ourselves, not what others think of us, not what image we present, but what we know in our bones when no one is watching. Honor isn't decoration, it's the quiet, unshakable feeling that you've acted in alignment with your values, that you didn't betray yourself, even when it would have been easier. True honor doesn't need applause. It doesn't come from winning or being seen. It comes from the moment you choose truth over comfort, integrity over gain, restraint over revenge. It's when you feel the pull to lie, to cheat, to bend your principles and don't. Not because someone will catch you, but because you will, and you refuse to live with that. Schopenhauer reminds us that honor is an internal contract. Break it, and it won't be the world that suffers. It'll be your own reflection. You'll carry the weight of that fracture, even if no one else ever sees the crack. That's why honor is sacred. It isn't given, it's kept, and it's harder to reclaim than it is to protect. When everything falls away, titles, followers, fortunes, honor is what remains or doesn't. And in the end, it's not about who praises you at your funeral. It's about whether you can live each day without shame echoing in your silence, because no one else lives with your choices as long as you do. Use time wisely. Use time wisely. Schopenhauer's words here are not gentle advice. They are a warning whispered through the ticking of the clock. Time is not wealth. It is not energy. It is not love. It is something far more brutal, irreplaceable. Every second that passes is a second you will never see again. And yet, most people treat time as if it were endless, trading it for obligations they hate, distractions that numb, or silence they're too afraid to sit with. We waste time waiting for the right mood, the perfect plan, the permission we think we need. But life does not pause. It slips away in quiet increments, in long scrolls, in one more episode, in staying silent when you should have spoken, in staying put when your soul begged you to move. You don't lose time all at once. You leak it day by day, excuse by excuse, until one morning, what's left no longer feels like enough. Schopenhauer understood that to use time wisely is to feel its weight, to carry each hour like it matters, not with panic, but with reverence. It means saying no to what drains you. It means creating, not just consuming, loving, not just enduring, acting, not just planning, because nothing in your life, not your money, not your status, not even your relationships, is more limited than time. This quote doesn't ask you to rush. It asks you to wake up, to realize that time is not something you have, it's something you're spending. Right now, whether you choose to or not, women are natural rivals. Women are natural rivals. With this controversial quote, Schopenhauer wasn't offering a compliment. He was observing a brutal pattern he saw in the emotional landscape of human nature. His words, sharpened by pessimism, reflect a belief that beneath society's pleasantries lies a deeper current of unconscious competition, especially where survival, attention, and reproductive instincts are involved. In this light, rivalry isn't taught. It's inherited. It's ancient. And it doesn't need malice to exist, only biology. In Schopenhauer's worldview, women compete not because they're shallow, but because they are wired to secure what feels scarce: safety, status, love, devotion. And in a world that often objectifies, marginalizes, and pits them against each other, this rivalry can become quietly vicious, not always with cruelty, but with comparison, with silent judgments, with envy dressed as politeness. It's the glance at another woman's beauty, the way one success can stir another's insecurity, the quiet fear of being replaced. But to understand this quote fully, we must look beyond gender. It isn't just about women. It's about the human condition, about how competition lives in all of us when we are told we're not enough, when our value is measured against each other. Schopenhauer may have spoken this with a blunt generalization, but the truth he touched is universal. Rivalry begins where self-worth is threatened. This quote should not be read as an insult, but as a mirror. If we see rivalry, it's because the world taught us to fight for space, instead of realizing we were never meant to take it from each other, but to grow within it together. Reason predicts. Reason predicts. In this stark and steady phrase, Schopenhauer reminds us of the quiet, unsung power of rational thought, not to control the future, but to anticipate it, to see patterns before chaos arrives, to shine light into the fog of what might be. Reason is not emotional. It doesn't hope. It doesn't fear. It calculates. It reads the trajectory of actions, consequences, behaviors, and laws of nature, and says, this is what will follow. Where emotion reacts, reason foresees. It warns of the storm before the clouds appear. It notices when a decision made in haste will echo with regret. It tells you when your desires are leading you toward ruin, even while your heart begs you to follow them. Reason doesn't shout. It doesn't force. It whispers truth in the middle of our noise, and we ignore it at our peril. Schopenhauer saw that the human mind is capable of great clarity, but rarely wants it, because reason strips away illusions. It tells you when love is toxic, when comfort is costing your growth, when your pride is about to become your punishment. It doesn't protect your feelings, it protects your future, and that's what makes it so painful and so necessary. To predict is to care about what's coming, not just for yourself, but for others. It's the mind's attempt to preserve life, dignity, sanity, and when we reject reason, we don't avoid suffering, we invite it. Reason is not cold, it is mercy in the form of foresight, and when we choose to listen, we become something rare, prepared. Open mind, a working mind. Open mind, a working mind. In this sharp mathematical clarity, Schopenhauer offers a quiet revolution against mental rigidity. A closed mind isn't just stubborn, it's broken. Its machinery rusted in place, incapable of movement, incapable of change. But an open mind, that's a mind alive, fluid, responsive. A mind that doesn't cling to what it knows, but dares to question it, to hold a belief loosely enough to examine it, to let in contradiction without crumbling. An open mind doesn't mean believing everything. It means considering everything. It means understanding that truth is often layered, uncomfortable, and evolving. It means resisting the seductive comfort of certainty in a world that is anything but certain. When your mind is open, it is not empty. It is working. It's taking in data, reshaping itself, throwing out what no longer fits. It is alive in the truest sense. Schopenhauer saw how quickly intelligence becomes arrogance, how the more we know, the less we listen, and that's the danger. When the mind hardens, learning dies. You begin to repeat, not think. You defend, not explore. You react, not reflect. This quote isn't a suggestion, it's a challenge. To keep your mind open is to remain in the tension of uncertainty. It's to be humble enough to admit you may be wrong, brave enough to change, and awake enough to know that no belief, no matter how old or comforting, is worth more than the truth you haven't yet discovered, because only a working mind evolves. The rest just echo. All have untold stories. All have untold stories. Schopenhauer, who saw so deeply into the human soul, knew that what people show the world is just a fraction of what they carry. Behind every calm face, every polite smile, every passing stranger, there is a lifetime of ache, longing, shame, joy, confusion, and memory that no one else sees. We walk past each other like islands, assuming what we see is the whole terrain, when in truth, we are oceans of silence holding storms and suns no one has ever heard about. The quiet man on the train might be grieving a child. The cashier with tired eyes may be holding together a broken home. The friend who seems fine might be one conversation away from shattering. And even those who laugh the loudest often do so to drown out something they've never felt safe enough to name. These stories go unspoken, not because they are small, but because they are too big, too tender, too tangled in pain or fear or pride to bring into the open. Schopenhauer's words tear through our casual cruelty, our judgment, our assumptions, because once you truly believe that every person you meet carries invisible scars, you begin to look softer, speak gentler, listen deeper. You stop needing to win every conversation. You start honoring the space between words, the things unsaid. Everyone has a story they're not telling. Some don't know how. Some were never asked. Some fear no one would understand. But it's there, always, waiting behind their eyes, begging not to be judged, but simply seen. Great minds are ahead of time. Great minds are ahead of time. They don't fit in because they're not meant to. Schopenhauer's words strike with painful clarity. To think deeply, to see clearly, to question what others accept blindly is not a gift the world greets with open arms. It is often met with suspicion, resistance, and ridicule. The great minds don't echo their era. They disturb it. They live in a mental future while the world clings to the present's illusions. And that kind of isolation can feel like exile. The visionary walks through society like a ghost, half here, half somewhere else. They see patterns others miss, truths others fear, beauty others overlook. But with that vision comes loneliness, because no one wants to be told their certainties are shallow. No one wants to hear that the ground they stand on is fragile. So the great mind is silenced, dismissed, or labeled mad, not because they're wrong, but because they're early. Schopenhauer knew this pain intimately, the frustration of screaming truths into a world not ready to hear them, the torment of having to wait, sometimes decades, sometimes forever, for others to catch up. And by then, the mind that carried the truth may already be gone. To be ahead of your time is not glory, it's burden. It's watching people walk into storms you warned them about. It's holding a light that no one sees until the darkness comes. And when the world finally looks back and calls it genius, they forget that while it lived, they called it madness. Loneliness hurts most. Loneliness hurts most. Schopenhauer doesn't say it lightly. He names it for what it truly is, the deepest, most persistent ache in the human soul, more than poverty, more than failure, more than even death itself. Loneliness is the pain that lingers in the quiet moments, the invisible wound that bleeds when no one is looking. It's not just the absence of people, it's the absence of being seen, of being known, of mattering. You can be surrounded by noise, by friends, by followers, and still feel the cold grip of loneliness if no one truly understands what's behind your eyes. Schopenhauer saw this clearly. We are born into a world where we are ultimately separate, minds trapped behind faces, thoughts that cannot be fully shared, hearts that ache for connection but are so often met with misunderstanding or silence. This is why loneliness feels unbearable. It whispers that maybe you're unworthy of love, that maybe your voice doesn't matter, that maybe you are invisible even when you're right there, and nothing, no distraction, no achievement can fully erase that emptiness when it settles in. But Schopenhauer also understood the irony. The more intelligent, the more sensitive, the more self-aware a person is, the more likely they are to feel this pain, because they see the depth of their own inner world and how rarely others reach into it. This quote is not just a reflection, it's a reckoning, because in naming loneliness as the greatest hurt, Schopenhauer forces us to ask, who do we leave in silence? Who around us is quietly breaking? And when will we stop pretending we're not too? Solitude breeds genius. Solitude breeds genius. In this profound assertion, Schopenhauer reveals a truth the modern world fights tooth and nail to ignore. Genius is not born in noise, nor in crowds, nor in constant conversation. It grows in silence, in the raw, unfiltered space where no one is watching, no one is interrupting, and no one is expecting anything but truth. Solitude strips away performance. It forces the mind inward, toward reflection, discomfort, and eventually revelation. To be alone is not to be abandoned, it is to be unshackled. Great minds retreat not because they hate people, but because they crave clarity. They need space from the trivial, the trending, the shallow distractions that dilute depth. Genius is not a flash. It is a slow, agonizing burn. It takes time, stillness, and the willingness to sit with thoughts that others run from. Schopenhauer knew that solitude is both the sanctuary and the crucible. It is where you face your own mind without disguise, where you write what no one asked you to write, where you think thoughts too heavy for small talk. Most people avoid this space because it's lonely, but genius requires it, because only when you stop echoing others do you begin to hear your own voice, and that voice, when unfiltered, unpressured, and honest, is where brilliance is born. This isn't romanticism, it's realism. The mind cannot bloom in a crowd. It needs distance, it needs quiet, it needs solitude, not as escape, but as the sacred ground where something extraordinary finally takes root. Public praise is suspicious. Public praise is suspicious. In this razor-edged truth, Schopenhauer rips the mask off admiration, exposing how quickly applause turns into manipulation. Praise, when loud and public, is rarely pure. It flatters, yes, but often with an agenda hiding just beneath the surface. It tells you what you want to hear, not always what's real. And when everyone's watching, when the stage is lit and the clapping is relentless, ask yourself, who benefits from this praise? Because it might not be you. True appreciation is often quiet, private, intimate. It's the hand on your shoulder, not the megaphone. It's the person who says, "You mattered," when there's no audience, no performance. But public praise, that's different. It can be a currency, a weapon, a leash. People use it to gain favor, to soften resistance, to raise someone up just enough to control them, and sometimes to raise them just high enough to enjoy watching them fall. Schopenhauer wasn't cynical. He was precise. He knew how easily the human ego swells under the spotlight, how seductive approval can become, and how dangerous it is to let your worth be shaped by those who cheer for you today but might jeer tomorrow. Praise can blind. It can bind. It can make you forget who you are when no one's clapping. So when admiration comes wrapped in lights and noise, pause, look closer, ask what's behind the compliment, and remember, the louder the praise, the more it might be hiding, because when the world applauds too hard, it might not be love, it might be control in disguise. Public praise is suspicious. Public praise is suspicious. Schopenhauer didn't mean this as cynicism, he meant it as protection. In a world obsessed with validation, applause can become a disguise. The louder the praise, the more you must ask, who benefits from this? Is it truth being celebrated or conformity? Is it brilliance being acknowledged or obedience being rewarded? When the crowd cheers, it often cheers not for the raw, difficult truth, but for what flatters its comfort, confirms its bias, or entertains its boredom. Public approval is seductive. It feels like love, but it's often control. It trains people to perform, not to think, to polish their image, not their integrity. Many of the greatest minds in history were mocked, ignored, or exiled while they lived, only to be worshipped posthumously when it was safe to do so. Schopenhauer knew that if the world embraces you too quickly, too easily, you might not be challenging it enough. True insight unsettles. It questions power. It offends ego. And that kind of truth rarely earns applause in its own time. So when praise comes fast and full, when the world claps too hard, you have to wonder, did I say something real or something easy? This quote doesn't ask you to reject praise, but to investigate it, to hold it gently, skeptically, without letting it bend your spine or silence your edge, because when the crowd loves you, it may not mean you're right. It may just mean you've learned how to please them, and that's not wisdom, it's surrender. Happiness is the absence of pain. Happiness is the absence of pain. Schopenhauer doesn't dress it up, doesn't romanticize it. He strips happiness down to its rawest core, relief, not ecstasy, not endless joy, but the simple, sacred moment when suffering goes quiet, when the weight lifts, when the ache dulls, when the chaos slows just enough for you to breathe without flinching. That's happiness, not some grand, soaring climax, but the calm that follows a storm you weren't sure you'd survive. We chase happiness as if it's a prize, something to own or earn, but Schopenhauer shows us it's not a possession, it's a pause, a break in the noise, a space where pain, even briefly, lets go. That's why joy feels so fleeting, because pain is relentless, physical, emotional, existential. It waits, and happiness arrives not as its opposite, but as its absence. This idea hurts because it's honest. It tells you that happiness isn't a destination, it's a moment, a window, and that's what makes it beautiful. Not because it lasts, but because it happened. Because for a moment, you remembered what it felt like to live without hurting. This quote doesn't diminish joy, it deepens it. It reminds you to treasure the quiet days, the ordinary smiles, the nights you sleep without fear. Those are the victories. That's the gold. And if you spend your life chasing fireworks, you might miss the peace that was already there, in the stillness where pain finally lets you rest.